Story 1.
I teamed up with the other betrayed spouse to expose and confront our cheating partners at a hotel. I'm 43, and my wife, aged 40, and I have been married for 16 years. We have a 14-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. Our marriage had a challenging start, but we got through those tough years and emerged stronger. We married young, lacking some maturity, but our love helped us conquer any challenges. I'm not entirely sure if this was wishful thinking. My wife has been a manager at a large advertising company for 3 years, and I've been an engineer for 7 years. Both our jobs pay well, providing a comfortable lifestyle for our family. We are a close-knit family, always making time for our kids to create cherished memories. Despite being a good dad and husband, I was shocked to discover my wife's long-term affair. Despite some mistakes I made, now onto the discovery, my wife became distant, especially in the last 2 challenging years. She constantly compared me to her boss, who seemed to handle things better. I couldn't read her mind, unlike her boss. I didn't take the initiative to plan dates and make her feel special, something her boss did for his wife. I asked her what she wanted to spice up our love life, but her response was vague. I needed to already know and do it. Feeling clueless, I researched and bought books, but my attempts were met with disappointment. Unbeknownst to me, it wasn't me who was fixing things all along. We were close to her boss and his family, spending time together at barbecues, family outings, and other activities. I confided in her boss about our marital problems, thinking he was a good person. Back to the discovery, I grew emotionally tired from my wife's demands to improve our marriage. One night, she laughed and giggled while texting someone, and when I tried to peek, she angrily pulled away. Suspecting an affair, I made the mistake of asking her directly the next day, but she vehemently denied any wrongdoing. Unable to access her phone initially, I later obtained it and discovered deleted texts. Although some conversations seemed inconsistent, I gathered bits and pieces of proof confirming the affair with her boss. Instead of confronting her immediately, I waited, feeling devastated and concerned about the kids. Despite the pain, I didn't want to give up on the marriage. 3 days later, I purchased How to Help Your Spouse Heal from an Affair with the hope of saving our relationship. Planning to talk on a Saturday, she claimed an emergency at work, which seemed suspicious. Unable to confirm, she returned home late on Sunday, avoiding questions about her delay. I suffered, but she seemed indifferent. Desperate for stability, I contacted her boss's wife, who was as shocked as me. We decided to gather evidence on each side and compare. I snooped on my wife, and she did the same with her husband, easily finding undeniable proof. Her husband's arrogance left the text on his phone intact, making sense of the little text I found earlier. We discovered the affair had been ongoing for 2 years, and both of us were furious. Although revenge was tempting, we decided against it. They had slept together in various places, even exchanging pictures. Ignoring the images to avoid scarring ourselves, we sought revenge without engaging in our own affairs. We both drew up divorce papers around the same time, determined to move on from the betrayal. Our spouses were unaware that we knew, so we played our roles. When everything was set, they resumed their affair. This time, we collaborated with the boss's wife, knowing exactly where and how to confront them, even the hotel they booked for their weekend getaway. I personally went there with the sheriff, waiting in the lobby while my wife was called down from a room dressed in a bathrobe. Despite the distance from our home, it wasn't too far. The sheriff asked for her confirmation, and she was served after confusedly affirming her name. It was satisfying to see the shock on her face, but I walked away without rubbing it in. She grabbed my arm, demanding to know the meaning. I told her about the affair and said I was leaving, simple. She screamed, pulled my arm, and the sheriff had to intervene, telling her to release me. She started crying, but I left quickly to get home. My wife informed her boss, and he panicked, being served at home. We didn't give them time to recover. We blindsided them just like they did to us. My divorce will be finalized in a couple of months, while hers might take a bit longer. Both my wife and her boss are fighting the divorces, neither wanting to end their marriages. The excuses I hear are that they never intended to leave their spouses. It was a purely clean affair, nothing more. People have worse affairs and still come out with a great marriage. They messed up and would like a chance to fix the situation. I asked my wife about the outcome, and she said she was going with the flow, acting completely out of character. I called her an idiot. People around me criticize me for not giving my wife another chance. My kids know what's going on age appropriate, and they support me but wish we could stay together. My resolve is slipping, especially since we still live in the same house, and my wife is going to therapy and reading the book I bought. She says she's remorseful and will do whatever it takes. All I tell her is that she's sorry she got caught, and that's all I need to know. She called me a bitter, resentful person who can't look past all the negativity. She apologized later, but I know that's how she feels. The boss's wife and I still talk, which my wife hates. She thinks I might have a revenge affair or that her boss's wife is the reason I won't give us another chance. She has asked me repeatedly to initiate no contact with her boss's wife, just like she did with her boss. I told her she's crazy. We didn't do anything wrong, and why should I respect her opinions now? See, I think I'm done. I have no respect for her. She still doesn't want to give up and is actively trying to engage with me about her thoughts and processes to her affair. I see them as excuses, so I don't entertain her. She wants me to do therapy with her. I've read many places where the therapist blames the sufferer, so I said hell no. She wants me to read infidelity books with her. What's the point if we're going to divorce anyway? She wants to be with me. I told her she's not going to manipulate me with closeness. She says it's not manipulation, just showing how much she loves me. I corrected her and said, loved me. Now people around me, even my mom, are frustrated, saying people make mistakes, and your wife realizes through her mistakes that she truly does love you. I tell them I won't be anyone's fallback plan. I feel bad for treating her the way I do, but I still love her, even though there's hate. Am I being unnecessarily cruel to her? She's trying hard, but I just don't care. Should I reconsider the divorce? People are saying I'm moving too quickly and might regret it. Is that true? I don't know what's real. Update. Thanks for your concern, guys. My wife and I are in a sort of good place, but we're not reconciling. I'm still divorcing her because her affair was too long for me to get over. If it had been a one-night stand, that would be a different story, but no, 2 years is just a slap in the face. I've gone to a few therapy sessions with her because I'm not a monster and still love her. One session was very good and made me understand her remorse. She hasn't handled the fallout perfectly, but she's been trying pretty damn hard. The second session was a mess, with her being upset with me for continuously contacting the boss's wife and her being afraid of a revenge affair. It was the angriest I ever was throughout this whole mess, and we argued a great deal later because I refused to do what she wanted, which was to go no contact with the boss's wife. That was resolved when I promised her there would be no revenge affair. I know I don't owe her anything, but she's still my wife until our divorce, and I still want to hold true to my commitments. I've attended more sessions with her to check on her progress. Yes, this therapist handles both individual and marriage counseling. No, I'm not attending these sessions because I secretly want to save our marriage. I just want to witness my wife's progress and be involved if needed. After the divorce, I'll step away gracefully. The boss's wife is still leaving her husband, and he's still resisting the divorce. She's as determined as I am, and I'll admit, we confide in each other during low days. I still don't see any affair between us, we're just on friendly terms. She's a strong, independent woman who doesn't tolerate nonsense. My kids are doing well. They understand that divorcing doesn't mean we love them any less. They don't want a divorce, but they understand why it's necessary for us, in an age-appropriate way. My wife no longer works at the advertising company. She resigned after I served her. She's strictly no contact with her former boss, according to her. She sought help on forums to save the marriage. I've been reading a lot here, and initially, I didn't get why people stayed with adulterers, but after seeing my wife work hard to be a better person, I can see the temptation. She's not a monster. She's just flawed and made horrible choices, but is learning to be better. She's offered everything for another chance, but I'm not sure. As the divorce nears, I feel more at peace. We recently discussed her asking for a chance after the divorce. She's offered a postnup. I wasn't completely opposed, but it would be a very, very long road for her. To be honest, a huge part of me wants this divorce for a fleeting sense of justice. The only justice I can get without becoming an adulterer. My mom and I reconciled after I revealed more about my wife's affair, but now she's furious after learning the details. Navigating her anger is challenging. Regarding a revenge affair, I didn't want to write here until my divorce was finalized, but I'm just angry today and need to vent. As many of you know, my wife is scared crazy about a revenge affair. The simple reason is because I'm still in contact and see the other betrayed spouse. My wife is very insecure compared to the other betrayed spouse. Is that how it's spelled? The other betrayed spouse is younger, a model, very attractive, and owns a successful business. It makes my wife paranoid that I will give in to temptation and cheat on her as revenge. I still can't believe the nerve of her to give me the two wrongs don't make a right speech. Of course, she isn't wrong, and I don't intend to ever follow through, but her hypocrisy infuriates me. Every time I visit the other betrayed spouse, my wife gets extremely sad or clingy. I don't know how many times she has thrown herself at me just to make sure I don't cheat on her back. I reject her attempts, and it only makes things worse. It absolutely floors me that cheaters are this selfish, only thinking about themselves and their pain, while the betrayed have to trudge along and try to pick up the pieces. Another thing, our kids still see their kids. I never go to the other betrayed spouse without my kids, but no. My wife still thinks I have it in me to be as heartless as she was and take any opportunity to be with another woman. Laughable. Alm is still living in their holiday home, begging the other betrayed spouse to take him back. I won't lie. It brings me a sense of great satisfaction to see him suffer the consequences. He hasn't tried to threaten me because of how much leverage I have on him. He is allowed to visit his kid anytime he wants, but doesn't want to see me, so he makes sure I'm not around and then visits. I pity the guy, honestly. Currently, my wife has been extremely apologetic. She's been showing me a lot of affection, but I've been ignoring it because I'm not in a good place. We have a therapy session today, and I plan to express all the pain and hurt I've endured because of her. The rage I feel is becoming overwhelming. Update: during a recent therapy session with my wife, she asked for more time to win me back. She had several reasons why I should at least try to participate in recovering our marriage, not necessarily reconciling. I kept pointing out that she's only trying now because of the fallout from her affair. If she were still with the other person, she wouldn't be making an effort. She emotionally mistreated me for months, and I won't let myself be walked all over, even by the woman I loved. She acknowledged her wrongdoings and apologized again, making many promises to make it up to me. She wants our marriage to become stronger than ever and believes it's possible. I asked if she was willing to deal with my rage, because I have a lot of it. She said absolutely, encouraging me to unload on her whenever I needed to process the pain. Usually, when I ask her why she had an affair, I get a million excuses. This time, she was straightforward, admitting there was no excuse for what she did. She vowed to show through her actions every day for the rest of her life that she's truly remorseful and would never hurt me that way again. She opened up about her feelings, revealing she was very insecure and jealous of the other betrayed spouse. The affair boosted her ego, making her feel beautiful and desired. She admitted it was a fantasy that would never last, regretting it deeply. She acknowledged the guilt she'd carry for the rest of her life and said she'd probably never forgive herself. She confessed she could never compare to the other betrayed spouse, and her certainty that I would cheat back stemmed from the other person's beauty and integrity. The other betrayed spouse never said a mean thing or threatened her. It was all my wife's insecurities talking. The therapist asked what it would take for me to consider my wife's proposal. I couldn't think of anything, and honestly said I needed a time machine because what I have now is a sham of a marriage. I never signed up for this. The therapist suggested that all marriages face problems, and how they're dealt with shows the strength of a marriage. I was taken aback and told the therapist to focus on my wife, not us. The therapist suggested my unwillingness to listen to logical reasoning might be a communication problem. I didn't disagree. On the drive home, my wife and I had a long talk. She asked if I felt emasculated due to her affair, surprising me with the question. I answered yes. She then shocked me by asking if I would feel better if I slept with another woman. I reiterated that I'm not normal and wouldn't have a revenge affair. She clarified she meant a trial separation where I could go out and regain my confidence. She'd remain faithful and wait for me to come back when I'm ready. I thought her proposal was crazy, asking how it would benefit the marriage for both of us to have affairs. She argued that mine wouldn't be an affair because we'd be separated with conditions allowing me to see other people. I rejected the idea, finding it out of character for her to propose that. Despite not trusting her, she has been surprisingly calm and patient these past few weeks, almost like a different person from the insecure one. Even though she doesn't want the divorce, she has been generous in making the situation easier to navigate. Update: before I dive into it, I want to thank those who've been supporting me. Right now, my wife and I decided to be civil and spend the holidays together for our kids. This will be our last holiday together, though my wife hopes otherwise. I'm doing it for our kids because I love them. Our divorce will be final in mid-February. For those curious, we've split everything 50-50ths, though my wife has been generous. I'm unsure if this is a tactic for later nastiness, but so far she's been nice, confessing it's because I've been a great husband and father, so I should get a fair divorce. She won't lose much in the divorce, but I'll get slightly more thanks to her generosity. I stopped therapy with her because it gave false hope. She admits a desire for closeness due to my absence, understanding that I felt emasculated due to her affair. She's been frequently trying to engage me in closeness, which is new, since my wife hardly initiated closeness before. Over time, I appreciated her addressing my hang-ups, but I reject her attempts. She insists it's not about reconciliation, but she just wants me to feel good and desired. I've cut off contact with the other betrayed spouse temporarily due to things getting too personal. The other betrayed spouse confessed interest, willing to wait until my divorce is finalized before anything happens. I'm confused and unsure about returning her feelings, so we decided to take a break until everything is sorted out. There's been some suggestion that my presence affects her reconciliation with her ex. I have nothing to do with her decision to leave him. She's done with him, and we don't talk badly about our spouses when together. Other man recently apologized to me in person, but I didn't accept it. Call me petty, but I don't care about what he's going through. I have a question. Is it okay to have closeness with my wife, even if we're not reconciling? I miss the closeness, and my wife is eager, trying everything possible to initiate it. Sometimes I find it hard to resist. She even got rid of anything related to without me asking, as I didn't care to know where they had closeness. It's not easy for me to switch off these feelings. Is this a trap? Am I being played? Before someone suggests kicking her out, I've tried that, but I want her here for less hassle until the divorce is done. Rant, it's finally dawned on me. I thought I wasted years on a seemingly worthless woman, but she gave me great kids and memories I won't forget. That said, I now understand I can do better than her. I've received advice and finally understand I deserve better. She treated me poorly when another man showed her attention, investing her energy in him. Only now, when I'm over her, does she try everything to keep me and invest in us. Now she wants me to be happy, even being adventurous in bed. While our previous closeness wasn't perfect, I liked it. I realize I've missed out on a lot. Through her texts with knowing just the tip of the iceberg and how graphic their encounters were, she now values my boundaries and sees me as the king she should have before. But it feels fleeting. She's transparent and brutally honest, expressing regret for the affair. I see her constant look of shame and hopelessness when I'm unreceptive, making me hate myself sometimes, but it's necessary. Why can't I see this as a positive thing? Why can't I judge her for her remorseful actions? Many people have long-term affairs and come out stronger, right? Why am I basing decisions on emotion and not mature objectivity? Someone else might get the improved version of her while I navigate another uncertain relationship. Why not fight for this when everything seems to point to something good in the future? I've been given these lines, and I have one answer. I won't accept disrespect. Maybe I was willing to in the early stages, but I woke up from that quickly. This is for the people who pumped me and regularly asked about my situation. I'm going to enjoy this Christmas with my entire family and then move on from my wife. I decided to stop listening to the nonsense I created in my head to keep my wife's control over me and move on entirely from the idea of her. I won't be dating her or giving us another chance. We are over for good. I'd like to say my wife isn't a villain, and that's true. I want her to be happy, but it will never be with me. She has shown me that. I called the other betrayed spouse today and offered her dinner after the holidays for her support when I hit rock bottom. She said she would love to. I know this doesn't happen often, but we really supported each other throughout all of this, and I owe her thanks. Before people start talking about how much I planned this with the other betrayed spouse, I honestly did not. My emotions have been so screwed up these few years that the very thought of another woman never crossed my mind. And it's just dinner, nothing else, unless we both want it. But the closer the divorce gets, the more I realize I actually have options, and one option has been right there. What about I don't give a flying fuck about the dude. I do not think I will marry again, and I will tell this to any woman. Although my divorce hasn't been much of a hassle, I am losing a lot of money. Still, the whole idea of marriage just seems like a sham to me now. Sorry for being so cynical right now. I don't want this post to offend anyone, but I'm still jaded. I gave my best years to this woman, and I'm starting to realize how little I got back. Update, officially divorced. It's been a long time coming. It's over. My ex and I have officially separated for good. It happened almost 3 weeks ago, and for a few days after, I grieved like I lost a loved one. It hit me extremely hard that my marriage failed so spectacularly. I never cried that hard ever since I discovered the affair in the first place. I raged a lot too, definitely one of my lowest points. Everything has been organized for my ex, partially for the kids' sake. She moved out of the house, and I'm looking to buy her out of her part of it. She lives in an apartment now, a big downgrade for her, which depresses her. She's still going to therapy and is still invested in reading and studying infidelity. I don't know exactly why. We've had long talks leading to and after the divorce, minimal physical contact. I know I shouldn't entertain her now, but she's still the mother of my kids, and I want us to be good co-parents. I'm nothing if not logical about the situation, largely thanks to this community and others. Of course, it's the same tune, she wants to reconcile, but I think it's too risky for me to put myself in that situation again. Unfortunately, I'm not in the mood to give her that gift. This past weekend, I accompanied the other betrayed spouse to dinner with no intention other than enjoying each other's company and chatting. We talked about all sorts of things. Things got flirty between us, and I must admit I was very reluctant to entertain the rapidly changing mood. Well, I guess I should say the night ended in a very passionate way. Sorry for the TMI. It was probably the most perfect closeness I've ever had. The other betrayed spouse is very much a giver and, frankly, leagues above my ex. I did not intend for it to go that far, but the other betrayed spouse and I were willing, and I was too. I learned quite a few new things in the process, It's the first time I've ever had someone that enthusiastic about pleasing me, rather than the other way around. I guess I shouldn't call her the other betrayed spouse anymore, as she divorced her ex. But for privacy's sake, I'll still use that term here. I do not think we will take our relationship further, to be honest. I think the hormones and wine got the best of us that night. She would like to, but I'm undecided. I need to sort myself out emotionally, and I think she does as well. I feel very good, though. People might not like hearing this, but the closeness I had with the other betrayed spouse really helped a lot with my residual self-esteem issues. I felt desired, alive, and finally understood what I was missing out on. I will never settle for robotic closeness again. What was more satisfying was knowing that I wasn't cheating and didn't lower my morals. All things considered, I'm very proud of how I handled all this crap. I wasn't perfect, but I did the best I could. I'm probably coming out very lucky compared to many betrayed spouses, even if I did lose a substantial amount of money in this process. But that's because I was willing to absorb advice and listen to people with experience instead of going in blind and hoping for the best. Takeaways: respect yourself, never tolerate disrespect, even from those closest to you. Everyone deserves a healthy and fulfilling relationship. Don't settle for less from your partner. A committed relationship should have a satisfying closeness life. If your partner isn't putting in effort, especially if they stopped before or during an affair, don't accept it. Express your dissatisfaction. If your partner doesn't meet your needs, don't settle for unexciting closeness unless you both agree. It's okay to walk away. Communicate. It's incredibly important. If you're betrayed, only you can truly heal yourself. It took me a long time to grasp this. There are more points, but that's all I can think of now. I'll answer comments for a few hours, but after that, I'm done posting here and moving on with my life. Have a good one, everyone. Update: I intentionally avoided anything related to infidelity because I still get triggered now and then. I'm dealing with the trauma and trying to move on without dwelling too much on it. I'm okay, no accidents or disappearing acts. I'm still in IC, individual counseling. The other betrayed spouse, who is now my girlfriend, resolved her case with OM regarding child custody and finances maturely instead of seeking revenge. There's some tension among the children, and we've started therapy to help them adjust and understand that our relationship doesn't diminish their importance. It's challenging because not everyone is on board. My daughter, my ex, and don't like being around each other, and there's tension. My ex wants a second chance, probably upset that the other betrayed spouse is influencing my perspective. I'm genuinely concerned about her behavior. She tried something at a 4th of July party, and though I stopped it, she's persisting. People warned me she might pine for me, and they were right. The other betrayed spouse is letting me handle it, but is also growing weary of my ex. Did I mention my ex strongly dislikes the other betrayed spouse? I thought my ex was changing for the better, but since I left her, she's been a train wreck. It's puzzling. I treated her well, and she treated me poorly. But the moment I said forget you, she's desperate for my attention. I don't know if I should be angry about it. Current situation. Hello everyone. I've been searching for helpful resources to navigate my current situation. Check my history for more details, but I'll provide a summary. My ex-wife had a 2-year affair during which she was emotionally abusive and frequently compared me to her affair partner, Our closeness suffered, and initially, I blamed myself. When I discovered the affair, I eventually decided to divorce her, especially after a weekend when she lied about spending time with I connected with the other betrayed spouse, and together we initiated divorces while ensuring our children were informed in an age-appropriate manner. We've been open with the kids, explaining the separation without unnecessary details. Despite their understandable reluctance, they handled it as well as could be expected. My ex-wife pushed for reconciliation, but I chose to end the relationship, forgiving her but moving forward. The divorce was financially costly but not excessively damaging. Life after divorce. Soon after the divorce, the other betrayed spouse and I developed a serious relationship, having initially been friends with benefits. Supporting each other post-affair fallout was crucial. Without it, I might have remained with my cheating ex, or worse. I regularly talk to my kids, ensuring open communication. My son, age 10, likes the other betrayed spouse, while my 15-year-old daughter is taking more time to adjust. She wants me to be happy but is cautious about interfering in my relationship. We've discussed healthy relationships and her concerns, and she seems supportive, although she needs time. Our relationship is discreet to avoid overwhelming all the kids, including her 2 daughters. Everyone, including is in therapy now. Concerning my daughter, the fallout from the affair strained her relationship with her mother. She openly expresses hatred because she believes none of this would have happened if not for her mother's actions. She acts rebelliously toward her mother, rejecting affection and even cursing at her. I've stepped in to enforce respect, but it worries me. My ex-wife is trying to mend their relationship, seeking my assistance, despite it being my decision to divorce. I could throw her infidelity in her face, but I choose not to. However, it raises doubts about how I handled the situation. Things I'm worried about. My daughter lacks respect for her mother. She wishes for things to go back to how they were before. She's unaware of her mother's emotional mistreatment of me. My daughter is in therapy, but I'm unsure of its effectiveness. I'm concerned that she feels voiceless and overwhelmed. She's handling my relationship with the other betrayed spouse well, but I worry she might be hiding her emotions. I fear I've negatively impacted my kids' lives by divorcing their mother. Any advice is highly appreciated. Final update. I want to share a realistic update, not a fairy tale. The big question, how are the other betrayed spouse and I doing? Honestly, we're doing fantastic. If I had known a woman like her existed earlier, I would have found her years ago. Jokes aside, our relationship is the strongest I've ever had. Because my ex-wife put me through so much, I didn't really know what a healthy relationship looked like. I still doubted myself, but the other betrayed spouse has been an amazing partner, helping me through this. I'm genuinely in love with her. She consistently shows me how much I mean to her, and I feel the same way. However, we're keeping it at the girlfriend level, and I'm still unsure about the whole idea of marriage. We're keeping our relationship private and involving the children as little as possible, although they know we're dating. About the kids, it was rough at first, who am I kidding? But they're getting along really well now. Our heavy involvement in their lives and ensuring they had someone to talk to when they had problems helped. There's been a lot of therapy. My daughter and son adore the other betrayed spouse. Her children like me much more than they did almost 2 years ago. Her youngest even started telling people that I'm her stepdad at functions and outings I took her to, which was a surprise. I was concerned she might feel pressured to see me that way, but she assured me she liked me a lot and that I make her mom happy, so she's happy I'm her stepdad. Hearing that hit me emotionally, though I put up a strong front. We're doing better than okay, don't get me wrong. I had doubts about whether this was the right path, but with a lot of effort from everyone involved, it's turning out splendidly. No happily ever after, just genuinely happy now.
Story 2.
Husband foiled his cheating wife's plan to destroy him at a hotel and got revenge on her. I despised the get-togethers at the county club that happened every few weeks. It felt like they came up with a million reasons to throw some fancy party where a bunch of wealthy folks could show off and boost their egos. However, my wife Sandra enjoyed attending and always seemed to eagerly anticipate them. Unfortunately, over the past year or so, Sandra began drinking excessively and occasionally ended up embarrassing herself and, by extension, me. Sandra and I had been married for 24 years, and we had 3 college-age children. I met my wife while pursuing my MBA, and we seemed to hit it off right away. About 10 years ago, things between us started to cool down, and I assumed it was just a natural progression. I wished for more affection and intimacy, but I hesitated to bring it up, fearing it might strain our relationship further. I came to accept that the rest of my life might not be as romantic as I had hoped. Despite this, I had a stable job that paid well, supporting our family financially, especially with the expenses of putting 3 kids through college. Sandra didn't work and wasn't interested in it, preferring to engage in community work and social activities. My income was crucial for maintaining her lifestyle. Despite her age, Sandra still looked good, likely due to her frequent visits to the spa and salon. On the other hand, I considered myself average, with a bit of a belly and some gray hair. My job required me to dress well, a habit encouraged by my wife's love for shopping. While I was proficient at my job, I wasn't truly satisfied. I longed for a change, something that would bring me joy without having to worry about the paycheck. Additionally, I yearned to relocate to a different place. The house was too big for just the 2 of us, and I disliked the expenses and effort needed to maintain it. However, my wife refused to even discuss the idea of downsizing. She was set on having her large house, country club membership, and wealthy social circle. At a recent gathering, I mingled around, engaging in trivial conversations here and there. As the night wore on, I nursed my final drink for quite some time while Sandra continued to drink heavily. It seemed she had been indulging more than usual, and it was beginning to show. Over in one corner, a group of local ladies were engaged in a conversation about closeness, prompting me to quickly steer clear. Just as I was about to leave the room, I overheard Sandra speaking loudly. She mentioned someone named Todd Mitchell, attributing him to some of her most enjoyable experiences in bed. The room fell silent as some of the ladies noticed my presence nearby. Sandra, realizing I was there, tried to downplay her comment with drunken giggles, but it was clear her judgment was impaired. The other women seemed unsure how to react, with a few quietly leaving and the rest sitting in awkward silence. Sandra had a mischievous grin on her face as she looked at me. Setting my glass down on a nearby table, I quietly exited the room and left the club. Instead of going home, I headed to the airport and caught a commuter flight to Reno within 30 minutes. I always preferred Reno over Las Vegas. Being in Reno helped me see things more clearly in my relationship with Sandra. I spent the weekend in Reno to sort out some thoughts. Turning off my cell phone, I easily got a room at one of the casinos and quickly set up an account with $20,000 in the comp room. One interesting thing about casino accounts is that they aren't subject to federal regulations like banks, so there's no need for government reports. While big wins must be reported, deposits into the account are untraceable. I wasn't much of a gambler, but I appreciated their banking system. When I woke up Saturday noon, I pondered my situation over a burger and fries. Reno suited me well. The climate was pleasant due to the high altitude, and there were plenty of other amenities nearby because of the gaming industry. I decided to take a stroll down by the river to reflect on marriages that didn't work out. While I wasn't planning on getting a divorce in Reno, I thought about tossing my ring into the river. Later on, my way back to the hotel and casino, I noticed a real estate office with condos in the display window. Suddenly, buying a condo in Reno seemed like a good idea. After spending an hour in the office and 2 hours driving around, I found a small furnished unit that I really liked. The only issue was that I couldn't purchase it while still married. Fortunately, I managed to arrange a discreet lease to buy agreement with a substantial deposit. Offering a large deposit was my idea, and the seller was thrilled about it. One of the smartest decisions I made early in my marriage was taking charge of our finances. Sandra wasn't good with numbers or banking, so she was fine with me handling the bills as long as she could spend the money. That evening, I treated myself to a delicious sushi dinner before calling it a night. I deposited an additional $10,000 onto my Visa card at the casino's front desk. Despite the cash advance fee, I felt it was a worthwhile investment. The next morning, I woke up early and enjoyed breakfast at the casino restaurant. I ordered eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast just the way I like it. While sipping my second cup of coffee, I noticed that my waitress had a noticeable bruise on her eye. She attempted to conceal it by brushing her hair forward, but it was still visible. Despite the bruise, she appeared friendly and professional, making sure all the customers were satisfied. However, it seemed like she was new to the job as she seemed a bit too eager to please. A more experienced waitress would have been smoother and more confident in her approach. Nevertheless, I admired her determination to do well. I asked her about her name tag, which read Donna, and she explained that her real name was Dora, but Donna was the closest option available. After some banter, I offered to leave a generous tip if she shared the story behind her black eye. However, she politely declined, suggesting I leave a smaller tip instead. I agreed, realizing it was impolite of me to pry. Since I already had the condo key, I decided to pick up some essentials to furnish it. My first stop was the Silver Spur used car lot down the street, where I bought a Ford Focus sedan with high mileage. It wasn't ideal for long trips, but it would suffice for getting around town. I considered renting a car, but since I planned to return regularly, buying seemed like the better option for me. I managed to gather all the essentials I needed for comfortable living with just a couple of hundred, including a few outfits. The rest of the day was spent setting up accounts at various casinos. I wrote checks to each establishment, and the funds were deposited into my account without leaving any trace. By the day's end, I had deposited $60,000 across 4 different casinos. I also acquired a small spiral notebook to keep track of my gambling activities, jotting down amounts, dates, and casino names for a chronological record of my losses over the weekend. Although I hadn't actually lost any money, no one would question my entries considering my reputation as a poor poker player. I had 6 months to come up with a down payment for the condo, which I deemed manageable. With lunch forgotten, I found myself famished by supper time. Returning to the breakfast spot, I was served by Dora, who was working double shifts to make ends meet due to the high rent in the area. I refrained from prying and simply ordered my meal, trying to be polite. As I finished, Dora apologized for her earlier brusque, and I accepted her apology graciously. Adjusting to being here has been tough, especially with this eye situation, she confided. It's a parting gift from my husband when I told him about my plans for divorce. Hopefully, this will be the final one. By the way, thanks for the generous tip at breakfast, it really helps. Although she smiled as she walked away, it seemed tinged with sadness. She lingered on my mind for the rest of the night. I realized there wasn't much I could do immediately, so I needed to head home to attend to some matters before I could make further arrangements here. Securing a flight back wasn't difficult, but I wasn't sure about my plans upon arrival. The next morning, I found Dora working and managed to catch her at one of her tables. After the meal, I approached her with a request. I have a small problem and was wondering if you could help me out. I need someone to house sit for me as I have to leave today and won't return for a week or so. It's a 2-bedroom condo, so there shouldn't be any living conflicts. Could you possibly assist me? It will be for at least a couple of months. Are you serious? No strings attached? She questioned. I hate to leave the place unattended, I assured her. 90% of the time, it will be just you. And when I am here, I'll stay out of your way, I promise. Despite not caring much if anything happened to the place, I couldn't let Dora know that. Okay. Is it within walking distance of the diner? She asked. It's pretty close, but I'm leaving you my car as well. Just make sure it always has gas for when I come back. I'll call you ahead of time, there's a voicemail on the phone. Dora stood there, seemingly hesitant, perhaps thinking it was a setup, but I didn't have time to persuade her otherwise. Here's the condo key and the car key. The car is parked at the condo. It's a dark blue Ford Focus. Here's the condo address. If you're not comfortable, it's okay, don't go. I'll pick up the keys next Friday when I return, I explained, jotting down the address on a napkin and handing it to her. She accepted the napkin and keys, still unsure. Dora, don't worry about it. If you decide to go, great. If not, that's fine too. An hour later, I was on my flight back home, though I would have preferred staying in Reno. After retrieving my car from the long-term parking, I swung by the house. Seeing Sandra's car gone, I grabbed some essentials for the week: clothes, shoes, my laptop, passport, and birth certificate. Luckily, the company had some kitchenette units available, so I reserved one for the next 2 weeks. I put my laptop on charge and then called my eldest son, Jason. I explained that his mother and I were facing some issues and I'd be busy for a while. I asked him to reassure his sisters, who were all studying at Auburn, not to worry. Despite the out-of-state tuition, I was grateful we could afford their education. After ending the call, I plugged my cell phone into the charger and headed for a shower. The only food I managed to grab on the plane was a bag of peanuts, so I was eagerly anticipating a proper meal. Monday turned out to be quite busy. Before anything else, I made a trip to the bank and arranged for a substantial second mortgage on the house, exceeding its current value. But I knew that would change by the end of the month. I also sorted out the tuition for my kids directly with Auburn University through the bank, sending $240,000 to cover their prepaid fees. With a cashier's check of just over $200,000 in hand, I took care of some financial matters, including cashing in a couple of CDs and closing a money market account. I decided to hold off on dealing with the credit cards until later in the month. Running behind schedule for work, I found my secretary Emily waiting with a cup of black coffee and a grin. "Good morning, Mr. Terrell," she greeted me. "Heard about the county club incident on Friday. What's the plan?" "Yes, it's all true," I admitted. "I need you to gather all the information you can on Todd Mitchell, and please discreetly reschedule my appointments." Emily nodded in understanding, giving me a thumbs up as she left the office. I had initially thought it would take several weeks to sort everything out, but now it seemed achievable within a week. I promptly called my lawyer to schedule an immediate appointment. As I left, I made it clear to Emily that I wouldn't be taking any calls from my wife, and she wasn't to be allowed into the building by security. Jerry Proctor, a friend from college, was never fond of Sandra, so I thought he'd be the right choice to handle my divorce. "I was at the country club on Friday, Robert, so I have an idea why you were there," he said. "You were spot on." "I'm not trying to be smart, Bob, but it's about time. You were right again." I figured I could endure things as long as I wasn't publicly embarrassed, but that changed on Friday. "I need access to all your accounts and a couple of powers of attorney. My assistant will prepare everything and give you a call." "Is there anything specific I should know?" "Well, Jerry, I'm afraid the events of Friday triggered something in me. I've developed a gambling addiction. I spent the weekend in Reno and lost a significant amount of money. I'm going back next weekend, and I fear it'll be worse." "That's terrible, buddy. Are you keeping records of your losses?" "I am, and I'll continue to do so." "It might be wise for me to send you copies of everything." "Absolutely, Bob. I don't think we should discuss this further." "Agreed. Do you need anything else?" "I'm good, Bob. Handle your business and take care. Take this financial worksheet with you, fill it out, and bring it back tomorrow when you come in to sign those forms." "I've got your back, buddy." I then realized I missed lunch. Emily had a helpful sheet ready for me with details about Todd Mitchell. She suggested I talk to Wilma Grimm in HR before anything else. Wilma was a longtime employee known for her efficiency. She always dressed professionally, with her hair neatly in a bun, which could be intimidating. If Emily wanted me to meet her, it must be important. "Good afternoon, Mr. Terrell. Please have a seat," she said, trying to relax me, but I still felt uneasy. It felt like being in front of a stern teacher despite my position. I was in awe of her. She closed the office door. Emily briefed me on the situation. I don't engage in office gossip, but I deal in facts, Wilma stated firmly. Todd Mitchell confided in me 3 years ago. I swore to keep it confidential, but it seems I can't anymore. She gave me a serious look. If anything I say bothers you, feel free to leave, and our conversation will end. Don't direct your anger towards me. I'm just stating the truth. Do you understand, Mr. Terrell? I nodded, assuring her I could handle whatever she had to say without overreacting. She frowned slightly at my attempt at humor. About 3.5 years ago, your wife Sandra approached Todd Mitchell at a company event, she continued. There was heavy drinking, and they ended up having closeness in one of the offices. Todd was about to get married, but Sandra threatened to expose their affair unless he continued seeing her. He hoped she'd stop after his wedding, but she didn't. She coerced him into having love with her for months, threatening to expose him if he refused. Desperate, he confided in me, sharing the whole story, which I couldn't ethically disclose to you or anyone else. The best solution was to transfer Todd to another office. Once he moved to Dallas, Sandra backed off. Todd never told his wife about the situation. Any questions? It seems Mr. Mitchell was just as much a victim in this mess as I was. I was considering retaliation, but that seems pointless now. Any advice, Ms. Grimm? Now that you know you have the upper hand, I suggest you let it go. Todd Mitchell is a valuable employee. Don't punish him for your wife's actions. Thanks for your time. I think you're right. Being coerced into intimacy with my wife is punishment enough. As we stood up, Wilma smiled. By the way, it's not Ms. I've been married for 32 years. It was hard to picture Wilma Grimm as a being, but perhaps when she lets her guard down, she transforms into a different persona. Suddenly, thoughts of a dominatrix came to mind, and I quickly changed the subject. I had more pressing matters than Wilma's personal life. Emily had rescheduled all my appointments, giving me a clean slate. Despite Emily's efforts to explain my absence, my wife called 3 times, refusing to believe I was in Baltimore. Emily arranged for me to meet with the company president the next day and with the legal department that afternoon. I invited Emily to have dinner with me. She chuckled and mentioned her husband wouldn't approve. She joked that I should consult Wilma instead. My time at the legal department ran longer than expected, resulting in me needing to compensate a few of the staff for overtime. I apologized, and fortunately, they were all understanding. The process turned out to be more complex than I had imagined. Getting a cash settlement from my retirement plan was challenging. Closing out the 401k and shared savings account went smoothly but took time. Cashing in my sick time, vacation time, and company insurance was comparatively easier. By then, it was clear that I was departing from the company. I hoped the news wouldn't reach my wife before I was ready. I ended up having dinner alone, oddly thinking about Dora during the meal. I pondered if she had moved into the condo and whether she was still working double shifts. Although I barely knew her, I felt a desire to return to Reno and see her. It felt somewhat immature, and I tried to dismiss the thought. It was foolish to dwell on fantasies that would never come true. The following morning, I cashed in 2 whole life insurance policies and canceled 2 term policies. I was surprised by how much cash value the whole life policies had accumulated. I could collect the checks the next morning. While my car was insured by the company, I canceled the insurance on Sandra's Lexus, which was leased under her name but insured under mine. Before heading to work, I stopped by Jerry's office, submitted the financial form, and signed numerous papers his secretary had prepared. When I returned to the office, Emily had coffee ready for me. Boss, I don't mean to add insult to injury, but you should speak with Calvin Bostic in settlements before meeting with Richard Ryder. The company president probably already knows what I need to discuss with him. The settlements department was tucked away in the basement, devoid of sunlight, like a dungeon. Calvin, Emily said you needed to talk to me. Calvin Bostic was a quiet, efficient guy who got his work done. He led me to a private corner and shared some concerning information. About 6 years ago, a guy named Raymond Upright worked here. He was married with kids but got involved with your wife after an office party. She kept calling him at home and at work, refusing to let him end it. When he tried to break it off, she threatened to tell his wife. He called her bluff, but his wife found out and kicked him out, leading to his downfall. I don't know where he is now. Apparently, your wife gave his wife $10,000 to keep quiet about the affair, though I can't confirm that part. Thanks, Cal. I wonder if anyone else has any good news for me. I didn't mean to upset you, Mr. Terrell, but Emily thought you should know. You did the right thing. I appreciate it. Afterward, I took the elevator straight up to the 9th floor. I arrived a little early for my meeting with Mr. Ryder, but he saw me right away. Our discussion was brief and to the point. The legal personnel and payroll departments would handle everything for me. Once everything settled, I was to call him personally from wherever I was. He handed me a card with his private cell number on the back. There were no promises, no regrets, and no nonsense. While things seemed resolved on one hand, they remained open-ended on the other. I simply nodded and left without saying a word. Emily greeted me with a smile upon my return to the office, handing me my usual cup of coffee. I returned the smile and said, "Book me a flight to Reno for Thursday morning with a 2-hour layover in Dallas." She gestured for me to look out the window. Sandra was in the parking lot, arguing with a security guard. She's been there for over 20 minutes. They won't let her in, and she refuses to leave. What should we do, boss? It seems like the guards have the situation under control. My only concern now is finding someone to have dinner with. I don't like eating alone. I called Jerry to check on things. He said he couldn't do anything until I sorted out the financial mess. I needed to demonstrate that I had no money. Right now, I was financially well off. Between the checks I had, those that were on the way, and the cash in the bank, I was quite wealthy. I assured him I would head to Reno early and not return until I was completely broke. Sometimes one is a wealthy person. Occasionally, someone would poke their head in the door, telling me my wife was trying to reach me. She had all her friends calling their husbands at work to locate me. I stayed in the office a bit longer, tidying up to make things easier for my replacement. Sandra was perched on the hood of my car, waiting for me. Emily grinned and handed me the keys to her Honda Civic, suggesting it was a good excuse for her husband to pick her up and take her to dinner. "By the way, you're not planning anything reckless in Dallas, are you?" she asked. "No, just wrapping up some loose ends." "No revenge, I promise," I replied. I grabbed dinner at the Outback in Allentown and was back in my apartment before midnight. The next morning flew by. I signed more paperwork for Jerry, closed all the bank accounts, and canceled the credit cards. I arranged to have the utilities turned off at the house the following week. I collected checks from the bank, insurance company, and work. I was surprised to find out I was worth so much. I got a new cell phone and canceled the one Sandra and I had. I sold my country club membership to an old friend for $23,000. My replacement was already settled in when I made my final stop at work. He seemed like a nice guy who came from Boston on 24 hours' notice. He saw it as a great opportunity. Since Emily knew more about running the office than I did, there was no need for me to train him. There were a few things left at the house I wished I had, but they weren't crucial enough for me to go back for. Emily insisted I keep her car, and her husband would pick it up at the airport. I had to grab a couple of cheap suitcases to pack my stuff from the apartment. Anything I forgot I could buy in Reno. Suddenly, I realized I'd done everything I could. All my assets were now in cash, no stocks, no accounts, except the house, which I was giving to my wife. AirBlue was very flexible, offering available seats and moving up my flight. I called Jerry at home. "Hey buddy, just wanted to let you know I'm leaving tonight. Hope you have everything you need." "I'm good, Bob. I can serve the papers tomorrow, but I still need that financial info soon." "You might as well give them to her. I'll send proof of financial irresponsibility as soon as possible." "Be careful, Bob. I don't want either of us getting into trouble. Sandra will probably get a big-shot lawyer from Philly who might bail on her if things go south." "It's up to you, Jerry. Just do your best for me and don't overcharge. I'll be a poor man soon, don't forget that. Oh, and see, if you can find a guy named Raymond Upright, there's a good chance he might need some help, and depending on the situation, I might be the one to provide it." "Got it, Bobby. Have a safe flight and stay in touch." I called the condo and left a message on the machine, saying I'd be arriving later that night. I didn't want her to be alarmed if she heard someone at the door, so I made sure to mention I'd call first. At this point, I didn't know if she'd be there or not. I could only hope. It was strange, I didn't even know this lady, yet I found myself hoping for some kind of relationship with her. Right now, just having her as a friend would be enough. Her situation made her vulnerable, and I didn't want to seem like I was taking advantage of that. I arrived in Dallas early enough to have a relaxed breakfast. I was waiting in Todd Mitchell's office when he arrived, and I could tell he wasn't pleased to see me. "Mr. Terrell, I'd like to say it's nice to see you, but that wouldn't be truthful," he said. "I think we both know that." "Relax, Todd. I hope you don't mind me being a little informal," I replied. "I'm not here to give you a hard time. I just wanted to let you know I understand the situation you were in a while back, and there are no hard feelings." "You could have told me this over the phone," he pointed out. "I know, but I was passing through and I thought it was worth my time to clear the air," I explained. "I don't get it. Why would you want to do this? I'm the one who messed up. I owe you an apology for what happened. You didn't do anything wrong. I was young and foolish, and I made a terrible mistake. Even now I'm too ashamed to tell my wife about it." Todd, you were partly at fault for what happened, but I believe most of the problem was caused by my wife. Her actions created issues for you and now for me. I'm not saying you were completely innocent, but it wasn't all your fault. I don't want you to carry any more guilt than necessary because of my wife's behavior. It's very generous of you to say that. I'm not sure what to say or how to repay you. I handed him one of Jerry's cards. Give my lawyer a call later today. There's a chance he might ask for your help very discreetly. He might say he doesn't need anything at this time. At most, he might ask for a notarized statement confirming the affair. I assure you it won't get back to your wife. I stood up and we shook hands. It felt strange, considering the circumstances, but I thought it was the right thing to do. Todd Mitchell was a decent man and didn't deserve to have his life disrupted because of one mistake, even if it had happened multiple times. An hour later, I boarded my flight back to Reno, pondering what went wrong. I put in hard work to provide for my wife and kids, ensuring they had everything they needed, but it seems in the process, I neglected my wife. When facing such issues, we often try to understand why they occurred. Usually, I end up blaming myself somehow. I can accept that, but now I must confront Sandra's attempts to humiliate me. That's unacceptable. If she had been discreet, maybe I would have blamed myself forever, but she wasn't, so I won't. The evening ended well. When I arrived at Reno Tahoe International, Dora surprised me by waiting at baggage claim. She was dressed casually, not in her usual uniform. I didn't ask you to pick me up, I said, simply wanting her to know I was arriving. Good evening, Dora. I wasn't expecting you. I figured since I had your car, it was the least I could do. You're not working? No, I could cut back thanks to your offer. I wasn't trying to be generous, I just wanted to find a way to be alone with you. And what will you do when you have me alone? I haven't thought that far ahead. Any suggestions? Seeing Dora blush, I realized it was time to stop before I frightened her away. I sensed she was teasing me a bit with her question, which felt like a good sign. 30 minutes later, we arrived back at her newly decorated apartment. It had subtle touches that didn't cost much, but made a big difference in the atmosphere. To show my appreciation for her efforts and for picking me up at the airport, I treated us to 2 prime rib dinners. It seemed like Dora enjoyed the wine more than the beef. How's the divorce going? I asked. Terrible. I still have 3 weeks left before I can even apply, she replied. You need 6 weeks to establish residency, I reminded her. I thought this would be easier, she lamented. Why didn't you do it from home? I inquired. Dora paused, fidgeted with her food, then replied, Getting away from Tony was more urgent than the divorce. It's just a piece of paper that won't stop him from hurting me. I guess I used the idea of divorce as an excuse to leave. Her words resonated with me. Initially, divorcing Sandra seemed important, but now I wasn't so sure. All I really wanted was to prevent her from benefiting from our marriage, and since I had no intention of remarrying, it didn't matter much. We spent the rest of the evening chatting about hobbies, movies, and books. I noticed Dora didn't have any children, but I didn't pry. That night, we slept in our own rooms. By the time I woke up, Dora had already left for work. I found fresh coffee waiting, which was all I needed. I was still stuffed from last night's dinner. After a quick shower, I got down to business. Jerry, how's it going? I asked when I called. He sighed heavily before replying, Not good, Robert. I've got some bad news. What happened? I've only been gone a day, I exclaimed. Sandra stirred up trouble. She found out about the bank accounts and more, Jerry explained. She got a restraining order against you for everything. All your accounts are frozen, even if they're empty. You can't go near her or the house. You can't take anything from the house, not even contact your adult children. It's a mess, and it'll take a lot of time and money to sort out. Jerry, I don't want any part of this. I'm done, I confessed, feeling overwhelmed. So you won't be handling the divorce, he clarified. That's right, buddy, he confirmed. And she hired a private detective to find you, he added. I wonder how she'll pay for all this, I mused. I don't know, and I don't care. Just remember, if the cops or feds ask, I'll have to tell them where you are, Jerry warned. I won't risk my career for you, even though we're friends. Got it, Jerry. Make sure you cover yourself. I'll handle things on my end. I'll lay low for a while and won't bother you. Thanks for being understanding, buddy. I was counting on you. Take care. Well, that threw a wrench into things. Even the best plans can fall apart. Suddenly, I had to come up with a plan B, but I didn't have one. My idea to pretend to lose all my money in the casinos was no longer an option. I decided not to involve anyone else. Thankfully, Dora left me her car, which was helpful. I didn't know how she got to work. I was left with a small bag filled with money and checks. I had to visit 6 different casinos to cash my checks and get chips or credit. I was worried about going to the banks in case there was a hold on anything. The casinos were cooperative and happy to assist me. By the end of the morning, I had deposited everything at several places and had a bag full of cash and chips. After a quick lunch, I started withdrawing the cash. Within 2 hours, I had converted all the chips to cash and emptied the casino accounts. Now I had a large bag of money and plenty of it. So far, there were no issues or suspicions. It took me less than an hour to drive to Carson City. I rented a large safety deposit box at a small bank and stored everything there except $5,000, which I kept for spending money. I felt relieved knowing everything was secure. I was eager for another long dinner with Dora to celebrate. However, as soon as I entered the condo, I sensed something was off. Dora was doing her best to fix things that shouldn't have been messed up in the first place. When she looked at me, she immediately covered part of her face. "I'm sorry, Robert, it's my fault. I don't know how he found me and didn't realize he was following me until I got into the apartment. I should have been more careful. I'm really sorry," she said apologetically. Slowly, I lowered her hand away from her face. Dora had a new bruise and a swollen lip. A large, bluish bruise covered the right side of her face. "Was it Tony?" I asked. She nodded in agreement. "He had his 2 brothers with him. They're out looking for you now. Tony told me not to leave the condo." "Where are they searching?" I gave them the names of 3 casinos. "The idiots don't even know what you look like." "I don't think they're thinking straight," she explained. "It was clear what we had to do. We couldn't stay, and calling the cops wasn't an option. We left everything behind, drove west, and spent the night at a small motel in Grass Valley. There was only 1 bed, but I made sure to be a gentleman. I brought back some takeout and got some makeup for Dora. She tried her best to conceal the bruises, but it still looked bad. She kept apologizing to me all night. I was relieved when she finally fell asleep. The next day, we drove into Sacramento to get some clothes and personal items. I had booked the Grass Valley Motel for 2 more nights. Over the next few days, Dora and I spent time getting to know each other. There was no intimacy or suggestive comments between us. After just 3 days, I felt more at ease with Dora than I ever did with my wife of 24 years. When I wasn't chatting with Dora, I was consumed with worry about everything else going on. I hesitated to bring Dora back to the condo, fearing Tony might track her down. Similarly, I was reluctant to return myself, fearing someone might be looking for me. But I had carelessly left my laptop, passport, and other important documents there. I had a foolish notion that these items were crucial, which now seems silly. Despite only knowing Dora for a few days, I felt compelled to trust her. We were both dealing with troublesome spouses. "Have you ever been to Mexico?" she asked. "No," I replied. "Are we going there?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Just in case things don't go well, there's something I want you to do for me. I don't want you getting into trouble, especially with Tony." "You don't owe me anything, Robert. You've already done more than enough," she assured me. "Well, I'm unsure about what's ahead for me. I've stashed away a lot of money. It's not illegal, but I'm hiding it from my wife. If anything happens to me, you'll need to retrieve the cash for me." "Who's after you?" "You haven't mentioned that," she inquired. "Did you do something illegal?" "Several federal agencies are looking for me, along with a private detective. I'm sure the local police will be involved if necessary. All I'm trying to do is safeguard some money from my wife." "What should I do with this money?" "I've been thinking about it. Head to Guadalajara and wait for me there. Use whatever money you need to get by until I arrive." "How will you find me?" "Go to the Libertad Market for coffee every morning. I'll track you down. It's a big place, but I'll locate you." "What should I do then when you realize I'm in trouble?" "Or why not do it now?" "Just be patient. I'll bring you along. I'd rather have you with me than go separately. I feel better when we're together." "Can't we both leave now?" The conversation was getting repetitive, so I ignored her. I didn't mean to be rude, just eager to move forward. 2 hours later, we crossed the pass and reached Carson City. Dora's name was added to the access for the safety deposit box, and she got her own key. Back at the condo, I parked a bit away. The complex had a lower-level parking area beneath the units, open but covered. I asked Dora to wait in the car until I checked for any problems. "What kind of problem?" I wasn't sure. Given recent events, anything could happen, and it did. As I walked through the park area, I noticed something odd. Then Robert Terrell turned around. He was a small, wiry man, looking rather strange in his long leather coat. It wasn't intimidating enough to match the large black tool he held in his hand. "Do I know you?" he asked with a smile that seemed almost proud of his identity. "My name is Lo. Your wife sent me." "Okay, what can I do for you?" "I need your wedding ring and your wallet." "I understand the wedding ring, but why the wallet?" "I have to make this look like a robbery." "Make what look like a robbery?" Your wife hired me to end you, Mr. Turrell. I hope she paid you up front because she doesn't have any money. What do you mean? That was the end of the conversation. 3 large Italians approached from across the parking area, looking menacing in their long leather coats. Bobby Turrell, we want to talk to you, Tony shouted. Lo was caught off guard by the intrusion. As he turned to face them, one of them noticed the tool in his hand. All 3 reached into their coats as I dove across the concrete barrier toward the outside of the parking area. Lolo lost interest in me momentarily as I hurried along the side of the building toward the car. Shots echoed off the garage walls. I glanced up to see Dora speeding down the street and 2 men in suits exiting a black SUV across the street. It was clear they were federal agents, likely waiting for me. The firefight distracted them enough for me to escape the area. Dora and the car were gone. There was no way I was returning to that condo. I didn't know who shot Lo in the parking garage, and I didn't want to know. What I did know was that 3 different groups were after me for various reasons simultaneously. I got the message. I had a few options. One was catching a bus to Carson City to retrieve my money, but I decided against it. I decided against going to Carson City because I was in too much trouble. Yeah, hot sums it up well. I was just trying to escape from my cheating wife. What the heck happened? Since I wanted to let things cool down with the money, I needed to find a place to hide out. I still had over $4,000 in my pocket, which would last me for a while. Why was my wife trying to have me ended? I guess she didn't realize there was no more insurance money. I thought she was smarter than that. I made a big mistake. I took a bus to San Francisco. $1,000 doesn't go far in the city by the bay. The first 1,000 got me a social security number and an ID, so at least I could get a job. I found a room with a shared bathroom and landed a job waiting tables in a low-key restaurant. After about a month, I was earning enough to support myself and becoming a pretty good waiter. Some customers even requested my tables. I hadn't been paying my cell phone bills, so the service got cut off. I hadn't used it since leaving Reno. It only cost me a few bucks to get a new prepaid service and about 50 minutes of airtime. I wanted to call Dora, but I had no idea where she was or how to reach her, so I decided to call Jerry. Hey buddy, it's Robert. Just thought I'd get an update from you. Bobby, good to hear from you. Things are still messed up, but not as bad as you might think. Where the heck are you? None of your business where I am. Last time we spoke, I was dealing with a bunch of nasty people all wanting something. Am I still a wanted man? Well, most of that mess cleared up, especially after Sandra was arrested. But it seems the IRS is still after some payment related to your 401k assets. Apart from that, most of it is fine. What do you mean Sandra was arrested? I thought you would be the first to know about that. Ever heard of a guy named Lester Lowe? Yeah, I met him briefly about 3 months ago. He tried to bump me off, but we got interrupted by some other guys who were after me. While they argued about who would get me, I slipped out the back door. How does he fit into this? Sandra hired Lowe to end you. Lowe got injured pretty bad in Reno and spilled everything to the police. He said Sandra was going to stiff him on a $10,000 contract, so he ratted her out. Surprisingly, the cops bought it and charged her. She can't make bail, so she's waiting for her trial in jail. Jerry, I'd love to help her out if she hadn't tried to have me ended. I think her parents should be able to bail her out, but I won't. Let me see what I can do. Bobby, nobody seems to be that interested in you right now. Should I restart the divorce proceedings? We have pretty good ground this time. Might as well. A divorce would be nice, but I don't really care anymore. I guess it would tidy things up. I kept all the other paperwork. I think I can still use most of it. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. Your kids all came home when Sandra got in trouble. They were worried at first, but lost interest when the truth came out. They want you to call them and let them know you're okay. I'll get in touch with them as soon as I can. How did your money laundering scheme work out? Not worth a darn. I lost control and lost contact. I'll try to check on it next week, Jerry. Sometimes even the best plans in the world just aren't good enough. Sure, I'll keep in touch, buddy. Oh, one more thing, Jerry. Did Sandra ever mention why she wanted me dead? Not that I know of. I figured it might have been for the insurance, but she didn't know you canceled it. I checked in with the kids and everything was fine. They felt relieved knowing the tuition had been prepaid. They asked about Sandra and me, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. Some things would have to wait. I borrowed a car and drove up to Carson City. The safety deposit box was empty. She could have at least left a note. I couldn't complain, though, since I gave her the key and access. Did she go to Guadalajara or find a place where I couldn't find her? There was only one way to find out. There were several small travel agencies in my San Francisco neighborhood. Most of them offered group tours, which I didn't quite fit into. I finally found a tour to my favorite Mexican city with a last-minute cancellation that I could afford. It was the first time in my life I had to scrape together enough money for something. The trip wasn't that expensive, I just didn't have much money. I felt comfortable because some guys from work were on the trip. Most of them signed up for side trips, but I had other plans. The first 2 days were disappointing. The Libertad market was bigger than I imagined. It was a poor choice on my part. I wondered if Dora had taken my money and gone somewhere more exotic, like Bangkok or Tahiti. There was enough money in that safety deposit box for her to live almost anywhere she wanted. I didn't know if I should wait for her to walk by or look for her. I ended up doing both. By the third day, I was getting bored. "It's about time, Robert. Where have you been?" I turned around and saw Dora standing with her hands on her hips. She wore a wide-brimmed straw hat with a red band around it. "Say something, damn it. I've been going nuts here not knowing if you were even alive or not." I didn't say anything. Instead, I walked over and kissed her for the first time. I don't know why I hadn't done it before, but I was glad I did it now. That's a pretty pathetic explanation. Maybe you better try it again. The second kiss came with a big hug as I swung her around off the ground. "Dora, I missed you so bad. You still have to tell me where you were for the last month, but I can't wait till later. Let's go home and have some lunch." We walked through the market hand in hand. I felt happy and content for the first time in a while. "Robert, don't get mad at me, but I spent some of your money. I put most of it in the bank, but I needed a place to live, so I bought us a house. I was hoping you wouldn't mind because you had an awful lot of money in that bank." It was a beautiful hacienda in a beautiful city, and I was with a wonderful woman. I like it when a plan comes together. Sandra's parents were able to raise her bail money and pay for her lawyers. Jerry had no trouble getting her signature on the divorce papers. She ended up getting 5 to 8 years for trying to have me ended. Never did find out why. Todd Mitchell gave Jerry a deposition, but Jerry never had to use it. Jerry was able to find Ray upright. He was sober, but not doing well. When Jerry asked him how he could assist, Ray expressed his desire for a hot dog push cart. "I feel better after spending $2,400. I resolved my IRS issue for $44,000. The last I heard, Sandra and her brothers were still in jail in Nevada. We're unsure how long they'll be there. Now I'm free to go back home. My old job, with a promotion, is waiting for me. The law isn't pursuing me anymore. Once Dora's Mexican divorce is final, we're planning to tie the knot. The kids will be down for the wedding during spring break. Although the house in Guadalajara is beautiful, we probably won't live there full time. Dora wants to keep it as a vacation home. Emily is eager for me to return to work, especially with the new position. It's a promotion for both of us. Dora is ready to go anywhere as long as we're together. She wants me to introduce her to Sandra. That should be interesting. My plans didn't pan out as expected, but who am I to complain?
Story 3.
Penelope, or Penny as I always called her, and I have been married for 28 years. Our 28th year marked both an ending and a beginning. It was the year our youngest child headed off to college, officially making us empty nesters. I saw this as an opportunity to rekindle Penny in my personal life, which had suffered during our marriage, mainly due to lack of energy and privacy. Being working class, we live in a small house with thin walls, not a grand mansion with nannies and maids. I thought everything was going according to plan, and my plan would succeed. Once we got home, despite Penny's protests about her sore rear after the trip, I insisted she let me take a shower first. Then I made love to her. She seemed to enjoy it, and I hoped it was a preview of things to come. Even at 48, she still aroused me like a pervert, and I was still passionately in love with her. Penny is a nurse and was in training when we met. Between raising our children and the constraints of time and money, she remained a general nurse. Over the years, she often lamented seeing younger nurses come in, quickly advancing while she stayed stagnant. To say she was outraged would be an understatement. After some impressive closeness, Penny revealed her well-thought-out plan. She explained there's a chronic shortage of pediatric nurses at her hospital. A 6-month intensive training course would allow her to stay employed there. With the head nurse of another department retiring in 2 years, Penny could apply for that position. Then, in 5 years, she could vie for the matron position at her current hospital. This was Penny's ultimate goal. She'd researched it thoroughly and found out she could be paid during training, easing the burden on our income. Her increased salary would help us reach our retirement goal at 60. I was amazed by Penny's newfound ambition. It felt like I was seeing her for the first time, both scary and thrilling. But as I pondered why she hadn't shared her plans sooner, the reason for her reticence became clear. The only place Penny could take this course was in another state, and a 250 flight away. 6 months. It's been a long time, Pen. Is there anything closer? I asked. They don't offer an online course, she replied. No, they don't offer it, and it's not such a long time. Time will fly by. During the war, couples did this all the time. Hell, they got by with just letters for years. And of course, we can afford for you to fly in once a month. I remained silent, pondering questions and answers in my mind. Before I could voice any objections or ask further questions, Penny erupted angrily. Jesus, Mike, don't be so arrogant. I winced. I've never been arrogant. Not with her, not with our daughters. I was so offended that I almost missed the rest of her outburst. If it was about you and your career, the whole damn world would expect support and encouragement from me. But since I am a woman, you think that I am selfish for wanting you to support me in my dream. Selfish? When did I even have the opportunity to make such an accusation? I barely had a chance to get a word in edgewise. Taking a deep breath, I forced myself to remain calm. Anger will not lead to anything good, Pen. I'm not selfish, and I don't blame you for it. Just trying to figure things out. You've clearly thought a lot about this for a long period of time. While I only had 10 minutes, I said. Penny immediately assumed a tone of remorse, explaining further. Housing student nurses and working in a teaching hospital will keep the depletion of our pension funds to a minimum. Flying Penny back home for 6 months probably wouldn't be practical, given how busy she would be. But it would be possible for me to fly her over once a month or so to spend a weekend together. It all sounded pretty reasonable. But the gap between my immediate future plans and Penny's was confusing, and in hindsight, I think it made me vulnerable. Penny began nibbling on my ear, initiating a welcome second round, and effectively forcing me to swallow any remaining questions I might have. Ask any physical engaging starved guy in such circumstances. They will agree to almost anything, I thought. So I agreed for Penny to attend the next course, the last bomb exploding as she hurriedly climbed aboard. The course began the following week. After that, my well-thought-out questions meant nothing. I already agreed, remember? She reminded me. I felt like I was being manipulated. Penny left after a flurry of activities, looking like a child going to her first camp. She was so excited that she barely remembered to kiss me goodbye. I'm ashamed to admit, but I had a hard time adjusting to the new daily routine. For many years, I didn't have to think about what I would do in my free time. I'm guilty of leaving the planning of our social life to Penny. As long as she made time for my side of the family, I was content with her being in charge of that aspect of our lives. I know I'm not alone in this, as most of the guys I work with do the same. Most of Penny's evenings and weekends, excluding the children, were filled with activities that she organized and devoted to us. Or I attended to necessary chores like mowing the lawn, washing cars, and shuttling the children to and from sporting events. Now, from 6 in the evening when I returned home from work until 10 or 11 at night, I found myself feeling lonely and bored. It's not that I was accustomed to going out all the time because we never did. But now there was no one to chat with when the newscaster reported yet another foolish blunder by one of our politicians, or to share laughs and hold hands while watching our favorite shows. I even missed Penny rubbing her feet. During Penny's first week away, our evening talks lasted for 30 minutes. I couldn't help but wonder if she had factored in our increasing phone bill when planning and budgeting. I also couldn't shake off a twinge of jealousy. She seemed busy and thoroughly engaged in her new challenge. She dominated our conversations, sharing all her news. Her excitement was palpable. The names of unfamiliar people she mentioned made me feel excluded, like I had no place in her life at this moment. Yet, our conversations always ended on a positive note, giving me hope. Maybe her absence would strengthen our bond, and when she returned, we could pick up where we left off with our carnal life. By the second week, our evening chats dwindled to 20 minutes as Penny claimed she needed to focus on her studies, and our talks were disrupting her nursing mindset. It stung. I felt reduced to an intrusive conversationalist. I made an effort to always conclude our discussions affectionately, but by the end of the week it began to feel somewhat one-sided, though I tried to remain supportive and encouraging, keeping my frustrations and loneliness to myself. In the third week, she proposed that we call only every other evening, and oddly enough, she suggested she call me instead of the other way around. She said it would prevent her from being distracted at inconvenient times. By the fourth week, I received only 2 calls. I tried to be understanding. She had a significant assignment and was working the evening shift, but it was tough. I looked forward to flying to her on the weekend. I missed her, missed us. However, fate intervened. My planned trip had to be canceled last minute because Penny informed me of a flu outbreak overwhelming the hospital with patients. In that teaching hospital, everyone was working flat out. Yet the weekend didn't go to waste entirely. While refueling, I ran into an old friend with whom I had drifted apart over the years. He and his buddies played poker every Saturday night at the local pub. He invited me along, and feeling tired of being idle and forgotten by my wife, I accepted. The company was enjoyable. We played a few casual games in the back room before heading to the bar for some relaxing drinks. After years of my social life revolving around neighborhood barbecues, cozy family-style bistros, and kid-friendly events, the pub was a revelation. I was surprised by the number of single women my age or slightly younger who confidently approached me and, frankly, tried to flirt. It's funny how after years of marital contentment and child-rearing, you forget that these encounters happen in bars. It took 3 Saturdays, and I'll admit, several other weekdays. When it became clear that Penny wouldn't call that evening before the pattern became too frequent to dismiss as a coincidence, I asked my buddy Jeff for insight. "Mike, you're way off base, aren't you? Haven't you noticed that at our age, there are noticeably more single women than single men? What you're seeing are widows left for a younger model, abandoned due to a midlife crisis, or deceived by cheaters." "Why me?" I questioned. "Come on, Mike. You've been married so long that your self-assurance as a man is closely linked to what your wife thinks and says. Look in the mirror, and then look around you, buddy. You're more attractive than most, and thanks to your physical labor, you're still fit and muscular. You're not dodging a wife with a weapon, and you're not stuck at home with the kids, buddy. If you took off your wedding ring, you'd have someone within 2 hours without resorting to chat lines or buying drinks." I surveyed the room, noticing more than one interested glance. Jeff followed my gaze. "I don't want to cheat on Penny, Jeff." "I get that. But let's say you're on the market. I'd advise not being too aggressive. These women are out to snag a man tonight. Hell, hate to say it, but I reckon half of them are married and looking for a fling, just like half the guys here. Now look over there." Jeff gestured to a table where a despondent-looking woman in her 40s sat with 5 friends. She's probably just been traded in for a younger model, and now her friends are consoling her. Give her a few weeks, she'll be back, looking for a hookup to prove she's still got it and blame it all on her ex. If you're after a quick fling, come back then. Or next time, don't flash your wedding ring when one of the cougars comes over. It all depends on what you want. For something more lasting, check out that table. Jeff pointed to a group of women around my age, laughing and enjoying themselves. Looks like 2 are married, 2 aren't. 3 of them are scoping the room. That's where I'd aim if I were single. A bunch of coworkers having fun together. 2 are hitched, but that doesn't stop 1. The other 2 are lonely, but not desperate. They might seize an opportunity, but they're not actively seeking it. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Penny, apologizing for being too busy to call. I tried to appreciate the gesture, but it was hard as her calls and texts grew fewer. At least she remembered to sign off with, "Love you," better than her last few messages. I replied with a quick, "Love you too," before turning back to Jeff. "Okay, I'll prove my point. Take off your ring, then head over to the part of the bar nearest that table and order a drink," he urged. I followed his advice, leaning against the counter, watching discreetly. Within a minute of resting my elbows on the table, one of the married women sprang up, slipping her ring into her pocket. She boldly offered to buy me a drink, but lost interest when I mentioned my marriage. I couldn't resist pointing out that I'd seen her remove her wedding ring. She blushed, somewhat embarrassed. The others at her table observed as one of the single women approached me just as the bartender took my order. She waited for my drink to arrive before placing her own order. Glancing back at their table, I noticed their glasses were mostly filled, so it wasn't surprising when my new acquaintance at the bar greeted me and initiated a polite chat. A quick assessment told me she wasn't quite my type, and my body language must have given me away because she soon returned to her friends with a round of drinks. Sipping my drink, I awaited Jeff's return from the restroom to confirm his insight when I heard a soft hello behind me. Turning around, I found the second single lady from their table confidently looking at me. With my newfound understanding of the situation, I sensed she was creating an opportunity, but wouldn't be upset if it didn't pan out. If I were single, she would definitely catch my interest. It was hard to gauge her age. She could be my age or slightly younger. Attractive, slender, but not overly so, with soft honey-colored hair framing her face and a genuine smile. Glancing at her ring finger and then mine, I noted neither of us bore any untanned marks, indicating infrequent ring wearing due to our respective jobs. Custom dictated I offer her a drink, but she declined, opting to sip her own instead. There was a confidence in her demeanor that I found appealing. Clearly, she was comfortable in her own skin. We engaged in casual conversation about various topics. 10 minutes later, I confessed I was married, despite the absence of a ring. I could have concocted a lie about its whereabouts, but something compelled me to be entirely honest with Andrea, as I learned her name was. She questioned my behavior, initially interpreting it as deceitful. "Well, in my defense, one of your friends approached me not 20 minutes ago." She was so forthright that she removed her rings without hesitation. "This is Carol. She's not exactly my friend. We just met tonight. She's here with Sue, who is my friend. They used to work together. Honestly, it was surprising to see her here. It's a bit sad for her husband, don't you think?" I nodded in agreement. "I took mine off not to have fun, but to test my buddy Jeff's theory about why women our age frequent bars," I explained, laughing at the detailed account of Jeff's theory. Mostly, she concurred with him. Our conversation then turned to Penny. "My wife has been away on a 6-month course out of state for almost 2 months now, and I hate to admit it, but I feel kind of lost without her." "You must miss her," Andrea empathized. "Very much. She's busy with work and study. We hardly get to talk. That's why I'm here." "Tired of sitting alone and staring at the walls of our living room," I admitted. "So you're just seeking companionship? No hookups or one-night stands?" Andrea's direct question took me aback slightly. "No, I'm monogamous, but that doesn't mean I can't enjoy female company and conversation." Andrea nodded approvingly. "Well then, let's continue our conversation." Talking to Andrea was effortless. She recounted how she and her husband had invested heavily in their children as they grew up, to the point that when the nest emptied, they felt like strangers. 6 months ago, they decided to part ways amicably, and Andrea relished her newfound freedom. However, she didn't rule out the possibility of a relationship if the right guy came along. Our conversation stretched on for over an hour. Eventually, it became apparent that her friends were leaving. I noticed Andrea debating whether to stay or go, but ultimately, she opted to depart. I took her consideration of staying as a compliment. Knowing there was no potential for a relationship with me, she must have simply enjoyed our company and conversation. Compared to Penny's rejections, this interaction was refreshing. Penny's phone calls became even rarer and shorter. We spoke for 5 to 10 minutes twice a week. I consciously adopted a new, more relaxed attitude toward life, partly to maintain my sanity. There's no use in fighting it. Penny isn't interested. A couple of times when I mentioned the declining calls, she accused me of being childish and trying to make her life difficult with my persistence. Doesn't she understand we're in the same boat? Doesn't she have enough on her plate without my complaints? My protest that I wasn't complaining but simply stating facts went unheeded, and as punishment, I didn't hear from her for 5 days. Refusing to dwell in unhappiness and tired of feeling frustrated and powerless at Penny's whim, I began frequenting the bar several times a week, just to socialize. My visit to Penny the following weekend was inconvenient as she had assignments. It was painful. We'd been apart for 10 weeks, and I felt like I wasn't a priority to her. She made no effort to carve out time for me, for us. During our last 3 conversations, she didn't even bother to inquire about my activities. When the following week she announced she was having a tough time with her periods and wasn't in the mood to talk, I wasn't surprised. The next evening, breaking protocol, I called her cell phone. One of her roommates answered, informing me Penny had taken sleeping pills and retired early, leaving her phone with her friend for peace of mind. Meanwhile, I found solace in my social life, which proved more fulfilling than waiting at home for phone calls that never came. The absence of calls left me feeling like a lovesick teenager pining by the phone. I joined the Thursday night darts competition when one team needed a player, and I unexpectedly enjoyed the Tuesday night trivia quizzes. I met intriguing people of both genders, always making it clear to single women that I was married and not interested in cheating. Andrea often approached for a chat when she was with her friends. She began spending time with a guy and deemed him interesting enough for a relationship. However, it only lasted 2 weeks before he vanished. She confided that she couldn't handle his intense focus on physical engaging, and he left. This suited her. It didn't pass the seriousness test. We made a point to avoid deep discussions about Penny and my relationship, and Andrea never offered her opinion on Penny's behavior, which suited me fine. I was resentful toward my wife and her disregard for me. We went 14 weeks without seeing each other, and phone calls remained scarce and brief. Even worse, our conversations felt like an imposition on her. Sure, she had taken on the challenging task of balancing work and school, but did that mean I should be neglected, forgotten like old, worn-out shoes? Could regular brief conversations and texting really hinder her goals that much? The more time I spent with Andrea, the more I appreciated her warmth, friendliness, humor, and intelligence. I even enjoyed helping her, feeling useful when she needed support at the bar. I'd wait for her signal when she wasn't interested in someone, but found it difficult to leave. When she signaled, I'd approach, kiss her on the cheek, and deter the guy. Then I'd chat with Andrea until he left. What troubled me was how eagerly I looked forward to talking to her. She was a great conversationalist. We'd engage in discussions, nothing flirtatious unless debating Pepsi versus Coca-Cola counts. Despite there being nothing inappropriate, I couldn't deny feeling disappointed if I didn't see her in my evenings. For the first time, I understood how someone could be seduced into an affair. Suddenly, cliches like, "my wife doesn't understand me," or "my wife ignores me," made sense. I don't condone cheating, but I gained a new understanding of how it happens. The temptation was strong, a situation I never expected to find myself in. With each passing day, my resistance weakened. So far, I had refrained from any inappropriate actions with Andrea, but I wasn't a saint. With constant reminders of Penny's indifference, I didn't know how much longer I could resist. I wondered if Penny felt the same way, but quickly dismissed the thought. She's too preoccupied with work and school to miss me or pursue another man. However, halfway through her training course, I knew I had to act, or our marriage would suffer irreparable damage long before the 6 months were up, and I'd become something I never thought I was capable of, a cheater. I decided to call Penny without expecting her to call me. "Hi, darling. I can't talk for long," she began, igniting a hint of irritation in me. I pushed it aside. Anger wouldn't help. "I know you're always busy, but I need you to make time for me. I'll be brief." I heard her impatient sigh and suppressed my frustration. "Penny, let me be direct. You've become distant. Our calls are dwindling, and even when we do talk, you act as if I'm bothering you. You disregard my feelings and needs. It's as if you've forgotten there are two people in our marriage. Yes, I'm here to love, support, and encourage you, but I also deserve time and attention." If I hoped my words would resonate with her, I was mistaken. "Jesus Christ, Mike, what are you saying? 2? I've spent my entire adult life prioritizing our family. Now it's my turn. You're making it sound like I didn't prioritize our family, Penny. Like I didn't sacrifice or compromise for them. I gave up a lot, in every way. I put you and the children first. So tell me, since you brought it up, when was it my turn? Because I think I missed it." I was probably too busy with work to notice myself too. Penny burst into tears. "How dare you suggest I didn't sacrifice for our family, you ignorant idiot?" I tuned her out for about a minute, not wanting to absorb the insults I knew were coming. When she finally calmed down, I attempted to reason with her again. "Penny, our marriage is in trouble. Can't you see that? If things stay as they are, or God forbid, worsen, we won't have a marriage left by the time you finish this course. Lord, I'm tired of your complaining and guilt-tripping. Grow up." I didn't bother listening to the rest of her rant. I hung up. Apparently, it struck a chord because she immediately called back. "Look, I'm sorry, Mike, but you have to understand how important this is to me. I need it. Our marriage is fine." I didn't engage further. She wasn't listening. "Of course, I miss you terribly too. And I'm sorry you're struggling without me, but in the long run, this will benefit us. You'll see. We're halfway there already." After she passed out, forgetting once again to say she loved me, I grabbed my keys and headed to the pub. Maybe a cold beer would ease my disappointment. But halfway through my first glass, I realized I wasn't in the mood to socialize. I was hurt and angry, filled with anxiety, resentment, and disappointment. These emotions churned inside me like a washing machine. Not even Andrea's friendly smile could lift my spirits. I finished my drink hastily, said goodbye, and headed home. As soon as I walked in, I received a text message on my phone. "Are you okay? You seemed off today. I'm worried. Call me if you need someone to talk to." I stared at the message, tears welling in my eyes. A woman I'd known for only 2 months cared more about my well-being than my wife of 28 years. Sitting on the couch, I realized I didn't know how to respond for the first time since meeting Andrea. Was I getting too close? Was I emotionally cheating? We'd never discussed Penny or the state of my marriage, and I hadn't shared anything. Embarrassed to admit this to my wife, I knew I needed to tread carefully. "I'm okay. Just had a rough day. See you Thursday if you're at the pub. Take care, Mickey." I scrutinized the text before sending it, ensuring it sounded casual. Then I heated up leftovers and ate standing at the sink, realizing Penny and I hadn't talked about my upcoming visit next weekend. Since Penny hadn't mentioned anything, I decided to surprise her by booking a last-minute flight for next Friday. I couldn't wait another week to see her. I needed to be with her to remind myself how much I loved her. Although the thought of Penny being unfaithful hadn't crossed my mind, I opted for the surprise visit. This way, she couldn't brush me off again. Finally, Friday arrived. Leaving work early, I headed straight to the airport. Everything went smoothly, and by 6 p.m., I stood at Penny's doorstep. Jenny, the housemate who'd answered Penny's calls earlier, let me in and explained Penny and their other housemate, Gail, hadn't returned from school yet. As I retrieved my phone from my pocket, Jenny waved, mentioning she'd called Penny, her expression tinged with concern. Before she could dial, the sound of keys rattling in the front door echoed through the house. Penny's face lit up with surprise when she saw me, exchanging a quick kiss before darting off to the bathroom. I found it odd that she took her phone along, but with Jenny hovering nearby, I didn't bring it up. Jenny and I engaged in an awkward conversation while waiting for Penny, who seemed to spend an unusually long time in the restroom before finally emerging. Rushing down the hall to her room, she urged me to continue chatting with Jenny. As Penny retreated, Jenny visibly relaxed, and our conversation grew more relaxed too. Despite the significant age gap, I no longer felt self-conscious about it during our conversation. I observed Penny carrying a load of sheets to the laundry room and returning with fresh ones, prompting a smile from me. Was she trying to impress me, reminiscent of our early dating days? Once Penny deemed her room sufficiently tidy, she suggested we freshen up together before heading out. I found it odd that she opened the window despite her aversion to cold. After over 3 months apart, seeing Penny undressed under the shower, water cascading over her ample bosom, stirred intense desire in me. I proposed, but she teasingly suggested we wait until after dinner for dessert, citing her hunger. We managed to find a nice seafood restaurant Penny had recommended, where she chuckled at my quip about oysters not being aphrodisiacs. Reflecting on the surprise visit, I felt it was the right decision. We enjoyed ourselves with 2 bottles of fine Riesling, but one thing tarnished the evening: Penny's constant interruptions to read and respond to text messages. Despite hesitating to address it, given our teachings to our children about rudeness, I decided to bring it up, risking spoiling the mood. "Oh, honey, you know I wouldn't normally do this, but I'm one of the older students, and some of the younger ones see me as a mentor. I need to stay connected," Penny explained between texts, even as she devoured her salmon. She then asked how long I planned to stay, mentioning she had tasks to complete over the weekend. I tried not to feel disheartened by her question, feeling like she was already planning to send me back home as soon as possible. Despite my desire to have alone time with Penny, I took my time at dinner, wooing her as if we were young lovers once more, rather than a seasoned married couple. By the time we walked hand in hand back to Penny's house, it was already 11, and I noticed another car in the driveway belonging to Gail, Penny's housemate, who typically finished work around 10. The apartment lay in quiet darkness, with only the soft glow of the hallway light providing illumination. As we entered after dinner, wine, and our earlier shower, I felt a tension in the air. The time for gentle courtship seemed to have passed. Scooping up my wife in my arms, I carried her to the bedroom and gently placed her on the bed. Despite the 15 weeks of abstinence, I resisted the urge to take her roughly. There was an unfamiliar atmosphere that evening, a sense of distance between us. Our conversation during dinner and our walks had felt strained, as if we were no longer as connected as we had been just 4 months ago. The idea of taking her forcefully implied a familiarity that seemed lost. So, as Penny lay on the bed, slightly dazed from wine, I swiftly removed her underwear while she did the same with her top. Though initially confused, she soon relaxed, allowing me to undress her further. As we engaged in passionate closeness, Penny's reactions were markedly different from what I knew of her. Normally reserved, she now embraced the moment with abandon. It was a stark departure from her usual demeanor, which I attributed to her strict Catholic upbringing. But in that moment, she seemed liberated, unreservedly enjoying our connection. Her enthusiasm guided me, and I reveled in the rediscovered closeness. However, just as I teetered on the brink of losing control, an impatient knock shattered the moment. A female voice, unfamiliar to me, demanded entry, expressing frustration at our nocturnal activities. It was as if a bucket of ice water had been dumped over us. Suddenly, everything became clear: the shaved pubic area, the mysterious presence between us, the dwindling phone calls, the resistance to my visits, even her abrupt disappearances to the bathroom. It all made sense. As I gazed into Penny's eyes, I saw a mixture of horror and desperation. It dawned on me that she had been communicating with her lover, perhaps even during our dinner at the restaurant. Disgust washed over me as I beheld her disheveled appearance. She was no longer the woman I loved, but a betrayer, an adulteress. Instinctively, I knew I had to leave before my anger consumed me. Hurriedly dressing and gathering my belongings, I avoided looking at her, unable to bear the sight. Penny seemed oblivious to the turmoil raging within me, continuing to hurl accusations as I made my exit. 6 months may be a long time, but her betrayal had shattered whatever remained of our trust. How many of them are married? They made me feel youthful and liberated, not like someone entering grandma's twilight years. Thanks for letting me know there's more than just good old Jake. We can get through this. Oh, wait, we can't. As I fled, Penny's cries grew louder and more desperate. From behind the door, I heard a mounting sense of concern. Finally, suitcase in hand, boots untied, and without a backward glance, I swung open the door. She almost collided with me as she was pushed from the outside, while I pulled her from within. In that moment, I found myself face to face with a young woman who I assumed was Gail. Over her shoulder, I glimpsed Jenny looking disheartened. As I strode past my bewildered housemates toward the front door, I heard, "Who the hell are you?" Before slamming the outer door, I replied over my shoulder, "Penny's ex-husband, emphasis on ex," and disappeared into the night. I had a flight to catch, a lawyer to meet, a marriage to dissolve, a sorrowful tale to share with family and friends, a broken heart to heal, and a honey blonde to get to know better at the bar.
I was startled when Mike answered the phone, half expecting it to go to voicemail like all the other calls I'd made over the past 4 days. "Hello, Penelope. What's happened?" I couldn't find words to speak despite all my rehearsed thoughts. His tone threw me off. It wasn't one of heartbreak or fury, which I had anticipated. I wasn't prepared for his indifference. It felt like I was nothing more than an acquaintance. In the ensuing silence, his impatient sigh reverberated, causing panic to well up within me, fearing he might hang up. "Please, Penelope, make it quick. I don't have all day. I'm busy. It's quiz night today." Quiz night? How could that take precedence over our marriage? I blurted out before I could stop myself. "Obviously, Penelope, you don't understand how important this is to me. I need it." I winced as echoes of past conversations reverberated in my mind, feeling a surge of anger as Mike seemed to throw them back at me. "Please don't trivialize our marriage like that. We need to talk." But it seemed futile. He might as well have not spoken at all. "Listen, I have to go. The team relies on my history knowledge. I can't let them down. Let's talk later." Staring at my phone in disbelief, I felt the sour aftertaste of the wine I had drunk to steady my nerves before the call. Reflecting on my decision to stay rather than fly home immediately, I regretted giving Mike time to cool down. I shouldn't have hesitated. I should have chased after him, undressed if necessary. What held me back? Fear, nerves, guilt, shame, all played a part to varying degrees. And of course, the training course was also a significant factor. I had a crucial exam on Monday, and I was determined not to let 3 months of hard work go to waste no matter what. While I had enjoyed myself during my time away, I had also put in a lot of effort and didn't want it to be for nothing. Over the weekend, I used the need to study for the exam as a distraction between my attempts to reach Mike. The exam took place yesterday, and I still hadn't booked a ticket home. Encountering Mike in our home somehow made the situation feel more real, as if the house belonged to him and the apartment to me. Though it seemed unlikely, I hoped he would return so we could talk on my terms. I rested my head in my hands. Facing reality was difficult. 4 days had passed, and it was clear Mike wasn't coming back to confront me. I glanced at my phone and saw several messages from Jake, resisting the urge to open them, which was also challenging. The time on the screen indicated it was already 7 a.m. It was too late to ask the course coordinator for time off. I would have to wait until morning. I hoped I wouldn't need to explain in detail why I needed the time off. It would undoubtedly be awkward. Simply mentioning family matters should suffice. Putting my phone away, I wandered into the kitchen and peered into the pantry, feeling overwhelmed by the thought of preparing anything, especially since I had no appetite. I retreated to my room, lying on the bed and staring at the ceiling. Despite closing my eyes, sleep eluded me. My mind remained active. How could I make Mike understand that my absence was separate from him and us, Running parallel rather than opposing? How could I convey that our marriage was never in jeopardy? I loved him, always had and always would. A surge of anger coursed through me. Curse men and their egos. Curse pride. Yes, I had broken my wedding vows, but only physically. Emotionally and mentally, I was still devoted to Mike. How could I make him see that this was all that truly mattered? Not a mere physical lapse, but the enduring connection of heart and mind. While I had succumbed to temptation, just as this course promised financial benefits in the long run, my indiscretion would invigorate our bed life. Couldn't he see that he would finally have the vibrant, uninhibited closeness he had long desired? I turned and noticed Mike's deodorant on the bedside table, left behind in his rush to leave. Leaning over, I picked it up and brought it to my face, the familiar scent bringing tears to my eyes. Closing them, I buried my face in the pillow, trying to erase the image of his shocked and pained expression. Hearing him was not my intention, but despite this, I felt deep regret for my actions. Clutching the deodorant to my chest, I tried to focus on the positives. None of our children had contacted us, and I hoped that Mike hadn't told them anything. He also hadn't yelled or insulted me, which should be a good sign, right? Sitting up, I entertained the worrying thought that Mike's silence might be due to him dealing with lawyers, changing locks, or emptying bank accounts to hurt me and our marriage. Jumping out of bed, I hurried to the living room where I left my laptop. Grabbing it, I returned to the room, my ears pounding as I waited for it to load. It felt like an eternity had passed. With trembling fingers, I logged into our bank account. Leaning on the pillows, tears streamed down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief. Mike hadn't touched the money. As I wiped my tears, I prepared to log out when a nagging voice warned me. Just because Mike hadn't emptied his accounts yet didn't mean he wouldn't. Wanting to protect myself, I transferred a small amount to an old account in my name, enough to cover expenses like plane tickets, taxis, and food. I intended to log out, but the small messenger icon showed messages for me. Despite my intentions, curiosity overcame me. Clicking on it, I saw messages from Jake, a gorgeous 25-year-old. More tears streamed down my cheeks, tears of disappointment and melancholy. Despite everything, at that moment, I longed to call him, to hear him tell me how hot I was again. I wanted to see his need for me in his face and body. Cursing the young man who started this, I remembered the first time I was taken advantage of after drinking too much while trying to fit in with younger classmates. But it was good, damn good. And then I couldn't stop. I wanted lust. I wanted to feel admired and desired, to be told again that I was the best woman in their life. I wanted to feel strong again. This power was absorbed. I was at war with myself, knowing that if I answered Jake's messages, he would come. I whimpered, the sound escaping me as I clenched my fist and pressed it to my lips. I should have resisted. If Mike found out about this, it could mean the end of my marriage. Rolling onto my stomach, I inadvertently knocked the laptop off the bed, causing it to crash to the floor. I didn't care. I cried over my loss, knowing there would be a price to pay to save my marriage. I must never give in to my dependence again. Drifting off to sleep, I awoke to sunlight streaming through the window. Feeling terrible, I trudged into the bathroom for a shower. Inserting my key into the lock, I turned it, relieved to find that Mike hadn't changed the locks. Another good sign. He hasn't touched the bank accounts, hasn't informed our kids, hasn't served me with divorce papers. It's Thursday, so he's had plenty of time to prepare them. And my keys still work. Mike will forgive me. It may take time, but he will forgive. Love fills me. Mike is a good person, the best, and he loves me. He will find a way to come to terms with this, and we will move on with our lives. We will both pay a price for this. Mike will always know that I found pleasure with another man, and I will have to never go out with him again. Trails of fidelity, of course, this is a high price, but it is worth paying. I opened the door expecting to find the house in disarray. Mike's 3+ months of being alone were about to create a huge mess. I was wrong. Everything is clear. Neat. At least in the living room. I went into the kitchen and dining room. It's the same there, spotlessly clean. He even wiped off the dust. Was he cleaning here in preparation for my return? If so, then this is another good sign. But where is he? It's 6:30. He should be home after work looking for his dinner. I went over to the stove and ran my hand over the burners. They were stone cold. I checked the refrigerator. It's fully stocked, including a plate of fried chicken and vegetables wrapped in plastic. Did he really cook something like that in the microwave for dinner? There are no dishes in the sink. Did he wash and dry them or decide to dine out? I thought about calling or texting him, but after our only conversation on Tuesday, I wasn't comfortable with what he might say. He definitely didn't come to pick me up at the airport, even though I sent him an SMS with flight information. Sighing, I filled the kettle, ready for a much-needed cup of tea. While I waited for it to boil, I pondered the conflicting signs Mike was giving me. On one hand, he did nothing that would suggest he's decided to end our marriage, but at the same time he ignored my voicemails and text messages and didn't meet me at the airport. Maybe he's just being petty and wants to punish me. After making tea, I sat down at my usual spot at our table. Looking at the table and the empty chair around it, I smiled, remembering the lively discussions and banter exchanged. We may not have been wealthy financially, but we certainly were rich in love and happiness. Those memories touched me. Mike will remember them too, and he's such a softie when it comes to kids. He wouldn't want them to have to choose or divide their time between us. For this reason alone, he will find a way to forgive me, but the question remains open. Where is he? Leaving the cup of tea on the table, I climbed the stairs and walked along the corridor to our room. Okay, he was at home. There was still a faint warmth in our bathroom. Once again, I was struck by the cleanliness. It's not that Mike was messy, but I assumed without me around, he might revert to typical guy behavior and not bother tidying up. Lost in thought, I returned to the dining room and sat, sipping tea. Where could he be? My stomach growled. I was hungry. I headed to the refrigerator. Could Mike have saved the chicken dinner for me? I lifted the corner of the wrap and took a sniff. It smelled delicious. I placed the plate in the microwave and sat back down, waiting for it to beep. The fact that I had no clue where my husband was bothered me. I replayed our conversations over the past 16 weeks. What did Mike say he did for fun? I couldn't recall much. Glancing around the room, I realized he doesn't usually spend his evenings at home. Anxiety crept into my stomach. Mike never used to go out for boys' sleepovers or weekend fishing trips. He's always been a family man. Has that changed? During my absence, a vague memory of a name teased the edges of my consciousness, something Mike mentioned in the early weeks of my course. Who was it? John? Jeremiah? Jason? I had a feeling it started with a D, but none of the options I came up with rang a bell. Then it hit me. Jeff. Jeff, whose last name I couldn't recall. I hurried to the sideboard where we kept an old notebook. It was ancient, from a time when we were too lazy to input numbers into our phones. Page after page I scanned, searching for Jeff, and I found him under Jeff Saunders, with another number scribbled beside it, so I assumed it was the same Jeff. I dialed the number into my phone. It rang a few times before going to voicemail. Frustrated, I thumped the table. Would nothing go right? The microwave beeped, reminding me I hadn't taken out the reheated leftovers. I'd completely forgotten about eating. I decided to enjoy my dinner while contemplating what to say when I reached Jeff. The meal turned out surprisingly tasty. Once things improved with Mike, I'd suggest he cooks more often. Finishing the last bite, I took my plating utensils to the sink. Now it was time for my second attempt to call Jeff, and I was nervous. What if Mike had already told him? Jeff was usually pretty straightforward. What if he confronted me? With a sigh, I resigned myself to it. Decision made, I checked my call log and hit redial for Jeff's number. He answered on the third ring. Hello? There was a hint of surprise in his greeting. Hi, Jeff. This is Penny Granger. I was wondering if you knew where Mike was. There was a pause, and I held my breath, hoping he wouldn't hang up. His silence allowed background noise to filter through. Hello, Penny. Long time no see. Yes. How are you doing and how's... I paused, struggling to recall Jeff's wife's name. Jane and the kids? Jane's fine, he replied, emphasizing his wife's name. I cringed. Now wasn't the time to mix up her name and potentially offend her husband. Everything's great with us. And you? I sensed a shift in Jeff's tone. He knew. It got better. Is Mike with you? Yes, he's here. And where are you? At a darts competition with partners. I gritted my teeth, suppressing a sarcastic remark. Jeff knew I wanted to know Mike's whereabouts. I asked twice, but it was clear he wasn't going to make it easy. Sounds nice. And where's that? At the pub. Which one? My local one. I closed my eyes. Clever guy. What's the name of your local pub? I asked, trying to stay cordial. The Royal. Not giving him the satisfaction of asking for his address. I thanked him and hung up. His parting words, dripping with sarcasm, infuriated me. Anything for the better half, Mike? A sarcastic idiot. I opened my browser and searched The Royal on Google. Turns out there were several. The Royal Hands, Royal George, and Royal Oak. It took me 10 more minutes to find out that the Royal Oak was hosting a couples darts event. I grabbed my bag, checking my hair and makeup in the hallway mirror. They needed some fixing. Frowning at my reflection, I rummaged through my bag for my makeup kit and fixed up. 5 minutes later, I was presentable and heading out the door. Tossing my bag into the passenger seat of my Toyota, I started the engine. As I waited for the garage door to open, I entered the Royal Oaks address into my GPS. Luckily, it wasn't far. My patience and nerves were already stretched. I was relieved to find the pub had its own parking lot, though there weren't many spots left. Couples darts must be popular. As I pondered this, a question arose. What was Mike doing at a couples event? Just cheering on Jeff and Jane? I pushed aside my anxiety and approached the entrance. Following the noise, I entered a room with tables and dartboards against the far wall. The games were in full swing. Scanning the room, I spotted Mike on the left, focused on one of the dartboards. A blonde woman sat beside him, not paying attention to the game, but watching the entrance. And she looked right at me. The expression on her face said it all. She knew. Warmth rose in my neck, spreading to my face. She lightly squeezed Mike's hand, and he turned, locking eyes with me. I don't know what I expected. Pain, anguish, fury. The gaze of a man who's endured sleepless nights. Whatever it was, I was disappointed. He looked unchanged. That's what made me freeze. My eyes were fixed on him, unable to look away. In my peripheral vision, I noticed the blonde woman squeeze his hand once more. My heart sank as I watched Mike cover her hand with his own, offering a reassuring pat. This gesture spoke of familiarity, friendship, and concern. Then Mike vanished behind his broad shoulders, shielded from prying eyes. A man stood in my personal space, and I took a step back, only recognizing him when he spoke. "Hello, Penny." "Oh, Jeff, hi," I stammered. "I was looking for Mike." "I understand, and, I want to thank you. Is everything okay with him?" "Well, I know he must have been upset after he returned from visiting me. I hope this didn't affect you and Jane too much." "He was fine, even great." This puzzled me. Fine, great. How can he be okay after I couldn't finish the sentence, after finding out that you've been cheating on him behind his back for the last 4 months? The heat in my cheeks intensified. They seemed to be on fire. Whether I was guilty or not, it was inappropriate of him to mention my indiscretion. I gave him a withering look, wishing I had the chance to turn him into a pile of ash. Jeff chuckled, fueling my anger. I clenched my fists. "Yes, but it's none of your business. I highly doubt things are as great with Mike as you say. We've been married 28 years and he loves me. I know he must be devastated. He's just hiding it so as not to make you feel awkward and uncomfortable." That means he's a good actor. I had to agree. Glancing over Jeff's shoulder, I realized Mike was doing an excellent job of appearing unconcerned. He and the blonde stood by one of the dartboards, with Mike preparing to throw the first dart. It seemed his partner was a blonde. I didn't like it. Not one bit. For all my dependence on men young enough to be my sons, I wasn't blind to their attributes. They were like meringues, light, sweet, and tasty, but ultimately unsatisfying as a meal. Like sugar, they lack substance. Mike, on the other hand, was a premium steak, filling and best savored slowly to enjoy the flavor. "Who is this woman?" I disliked having to ask, but the need to know overrode my reluctance to show vulnerability. Jeff turned to glance at Mike and the blonde, then smiled. "Oh, this is Andrea." Once again, Jeff was infuriating, answering only my direct question without offering any additional information. "Is she here with anyone?" "She's married?" Hoping to receive two answers by posing two questions, I persisted. Yes and no. I was weary and stressed, which made it even harder than usual for me to remain patient. "So yes, she is here with someone, but no, she's not married." The anxiety inside me intensified, and a part of me wished to avoid asking the next logical question. I was almost certain I wouldn't like the answer. "Who is she here with?" "With Mike." Despite mentally preparing myself, I recoiled as if slapped. "Well, that didn't take him long," I muttered, the pain overriding my verbal filter. "On the contrary." Jeff's eyes bore into me like lasers. He had 4 months to get used to being alone. He glanced at Mike and the blonde, smiling. I think he took to it like a duck takes to water. His smile vanished as he looked at me, his tone cutting like a knife. "But then again, so are you." It's been 8 years since Mike divorced me, and not a day goes by that I don't regret the actions that led to our separation. Of course, when it became clear that reconciliation was impossible, I was given the opportunity to indulge my dependence. But it was a hollow victory. It didn't take me long to realize that a constant sugar diet was ultimately unsatisfying, and the law of diminishing returns was at work. I spent 8 years chasing that elusive first high. If only I had realized then that I was doomed to fail. I try not to dwell on how my hobbies are getting shorter and shorter in duration. Even less do I want to think about other forbidden boundaries I crossed. I was once a reserved lover, afraid that if I showed too much pleasure, my husband would think less of me. I have now had more lovers than I can count on my fingers and toes. 3 times I did things that I pray my children never find out about. My relationship with them is already fragile. Looking around the kitchen and dining room, I feel despair. Without Mike, these rooms feel empty. He brought warmth and laughter. Now they're silent, just rooms. I guess I should consider myself lucky that Mike agreed to sell me his share of the house for less than market value, especially since I never returned to finish my course and remain a general nurse. But it's hard to feel happy knowing what lies behind his generosity. Andrea. Damn, Andrea was rich and she wanted Mike, with or without money. I knew for sure they had set off on a trip around the world. Scotland, Venice, Florence, the Greek islands, all of it. I knew because they paid for all the children, hers and his and the grandchildren, to meet them in Hawaii in a few weeks. This meant I would spend Christmas alone again. I glanced at my watch. It's time to go to work. I packed my bag and headed to the front door. Out of habit. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and winced. I'm 56 and age is rapidly catching up with me. It's getting harder to attract young guys. In truth, the young guys aren't so young anymore. They're no longer 20, but 30 and even 40. I sighed in resignation. What else could I do? There are few men my age suitable for marriage, at least the good ones. And whether they're good or bad, no one wants to marry me. My reputation precedes me. The only option would be to move to the other side of the country and start over. But that would mean moving away from my children, and I don't see them enough anyway. Not to mention an entire continent between us. While Mike and Andrea were probably kicking back and sipping Mai Tais, I went to change the bedding and put in the thermometers. I will end my days as a general nurse, destroying both my marriage and my career. And for what? For the taste of sugar. Sweet but bitter sugar. I blinked away tears of self-pity. Why cry? Nobody cares.
Story 4.
Blake Harrison stood at the kitchen counter, methodically chopping vegetables for dinner. The rhythmic thud of the knife against the cutting board echoed through the pristine suburban kitchen. At 45, he moved with the precision of a man accustomed to building things that last bridges highways, and what he had always believed was an unshakable family. The aroma of roasting chicken filled the air as Lena bustled around him, her golden hair catching the late afternoon sunlight. She hummed softly, a tune Blake couldn't quite place, but found soothing nonetheless. At 42, Lena still turned heads, her charm as potent as the day they'd met. "Connor's going to be thrilled," Lena said, glancing at the clock. "I can't believe our boy's off to college soon." Blake nodded, a mix of pride and worry creasing his brow. "The University of Illinois. Who would have thought?" "You did," Lena reminded him, placing a hand on his arm. "You always said he was destined for great things." Blake's knife paused mid-chop. "Yeah, well, great things come with a great price tag." Lena's smile faltered for a moment. "We'll manage, Blake. We always do." Before Blake could respond, the front door slammed, and Connor's voice boomed through the house. "Mom, Dad, I'm home." Connor burst into the kitchen, all gangly limbs and boundless energy. At 18, he was the spitting image of Blake at that age, or so everyone said. Blake watched as his son snagged a carrot from the cutting board, grinning widely. "Smells amazing in here," Connor said, crunching on the carrot. "What's the occasion?" Lena laughed, swatting at Connor playfully. "As if you don't know. We're celebrating your scholarship, remember?" Connor's grin widened. "All right, that little thing." Blake set down his knife, turning to face his son. "Little thing? Connor, this is a big deal. You should be proud of yourself." "I am, Dad," Connor said, his tone sobering slightly. "Really, I am. It's not a full ride, you know." Blake felt the familiar knot of worry tighten in his stomach. "We know, son, but it's a start. We'll figure out the rest." Lena clapped her hands together, dispelling the tension. "All right, enough money talk. Connor, set the table. Blake, finish those vegetables. We're celebrating tonight." End of discussion. As they sat down to dinner, Blake couldn't help but marvel at the scene before him. Lena, radiant as ever, laughing at one of Connor's jokes. Connor, animated and full of life, regaling them with tales of his last few weeks of high school. This was the American dream, wasn't it? A beautiful home, a loving family, a son with a bright future ahead of him. So why couldn't Blake shake the nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach? Later that night, after Connor had retreated to his room and Lena had gone to bed, Blake found himself in his home office, poring over financial documents. The numbers swam before his eyes, a dizzying array of expenses and dwindling savings. "It doesn't add up," he muttered, running a hand through his graying hair. Frustrated, Blake pushed away from his desk and stood, stretching his stiff muscles. His gaze fell on Lena's dresser, and on a whim, he walked over to it. He didn't know what he was looking for, maybe a forgotten bill or a bank statement he'd overlooked. What he found instead was a photograph, tucked away in the back of Lena's top drawer. Blake's breath caught in his throat as he examined it. Lena, younger and carefree, her arms wrapped around a man Blake didn't recognize. They were both laughing, caught in a moment of pure joy. Blake's mind raced. Who was this man? When was this photo taken? And why had Lena kept it hidden all these years? He slipped the photo back into the drawer, his hands shaking slightly. It was probably nothing, he told himself. An old friend, a cousin he'd never met. But as Blake crawled into bed beside his sleeping wife, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Days passed, and Blake found himself unable to forget about the photograph. He watched Lena more closely, searching for what? A sign of deceit? A hint of the carefree girl in the photo? But Lena remained as she always had been, loving, attentive, the perfect wife and mother. It was during a late-night internet browsing session that Blake stumbled upon the idea. DNA testing kits, available for home use. The ad promised quick, discreet results. Before he could talk himself out of it, Blake placed an order. When the kit arrived, Blake felt a surge of guilt. What was he doing? This was his family, his son. But the doubt had taken root, and he couldn't shake it. With a heavy heart, he collected a sample from Connor's hairbrush and sent it off for testing. The weeks that followed were agony. Blake went through the motions of daily life work, dinner, family time, but his mind was constantly elsewhere. He found himself studying Connor's features, searching for traces of himself. The boy's laugh, so like his own. The way he furrowed his brow when concentrating, just as Blake did. Surely, these were proof of their connection? Finally, the email arrived. Blake's hands shook as he opened it, his heart pounding in his chest. As he read the results, he felt the world crumble around him. Connor was not his biological son. Blake sat in stunned silence, the truth washing over him in waves of disbelief and anger. Every memory, every moment he'd shared with Connor suddenly felt tainted. The pride he'd felt at Connor's accomplishments, the love that had swelled in his chest with every "I love you, Dad," it had all been built on a lie. And Lena. Blake's thoughts turned to his wife, the woman he'd loved and trusted for over 2 decades. How long had she known? Had she ever planned to tell him? In the days that followed, Blake retreated into himself. He went through the motions at work, his mind a constant whirlwind of questions and accusations. At home, he watched Lena and Connor with new eyes, searching for signs of the betrayal he now knew existed. Lena noticed the change in him. "Blake, is everything all right?" she asked one evening, her voice laced with concern. "You've been so distant lately." Blake forced a smile. "Just stressed about work," he lied. "Big project coming up?" Lena didn't look convinced, but she didn't press the issue. Blake watched her walk away, wondering how many other lies she'd told over the years. As the days turned into weeks, Blake's anger festered. He began to investigate Lena's past, searching for clues about the man in the photograph. He combed through old emails, bank statements, anything that might give him answers. But Lena had been careful. There was nothing concrete, just a growing pile of suspicions. Finally, after nearly a month of silent suffering, Blake reached his breaking point. It was a quiet evening, much like any other. Connor had gone out with friends, leaving Blake and Lena alone in the house. Blake sat at the kitchen table, the DNA test results hidden in his laptop bag beside him. "Lena," he called, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Can we talk?" Lena appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" Blake took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "I need you to be honest with me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who is Connor's real father?" The color drained from Lena's face. She gripped the doorframe for support, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "Blake, what are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me," Blake shouted, slamming his fist on the table. The sudden outburst made Lena jump. "I know, Lena. I know Connor isn't mine." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes. "Blake, please. It was a mistake. It was only one time, I swear." Blake laughed bitterly. "One time? That's all it took to destroy our family." He pulled the DNA test results from his bag and tossed them onto the table. Lena's eyes darted between the papers and Blake's face, her lips trembling. "How long have you known?" Blake demanded. Lena sank into a chair, her body shaking with silent sobs. "I've always known," she admitted. "But Blake, you have to understand. I never meant for this to happen. I love you. We built a life together. A life built on lies." Blake spat. He stood up, unable to bear the sight of her any longer. "Who is he, Lena? Do I know him?" Lena shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It doesn't matter. It was a mistake, Blake. A terrible mistake. Connor is your son in every way that counts." But Blake was beyond listening. The betrayal, the years of deception, it was all too much. Without another word, he grabbed his keys and headed for the door. "Blake, wait!" Lena called after him. "Where are you going?" Blake paused at the door, his hand on the knob. He turned to look at Lena one last time, taking in the face of the woman he'd loved for so long. "Away," he said simply. I can't be here right now." And with that, he was gone, leaving behind the shattered remains of what he'd once thought was a perfect life. Blake drove for hours, his mind a chaotic mess of memories and accusations. He found himself on a dark, winding road, surrounded by towering pines. Without really meaning to, he'd driven to the old cabin in Wisconsin where he and Lena had spent their honeymoon. As he pulled up to the dilapidated structure, a bitter laugh escaped his lips. How fitting to end up here, at the place where their life together had truly begun. Blake spent the night in the cabin, huddled on a dusty old couch, his phone buzzing incessantly with calls and messages from Lena and Connor. By morning, he'd made his decision. He couldn't go back, not to the lies, not to the betrayal. With shaking hands, he typed out a message to his work assistant, Becca, instructing her to handle his clients and close down the office. Then he turned off his phone and tossed it into the glove compartment. As the sun rose over the Wisconsin wilderness, Blake Harrison disappeared, leaving behind the only life he'd ever known. 5 years had passed since Blake Harrison had vanished into the Wisconsin wilderness, leaving behind a life shattered by betrayal. The cabin that had once been a honeymoon getaway was now his permanent residence, a weathered fortress against the world he'd left behind. Blake, now sporting a grizzled beard and calloused hands, sat at his makeshift desk, poring over blueprints for a small local project. He'd reinvented himself as a freelance contractor, taking on jobs that kept him busy without drawing too much attention. The locals knew him as John, a quiet man with a knack for construction and a past he never discussed. A knock at the door jolted Blake from his concentration. Visitors were rare up here, and certainly not welcome. He approached the door cautiously, his heart racing as he wondered if his carefully constructed solitude was about to crumble. When he opened the door, the sight before him knocked the wind from his lungs. Connor, no longer the gangly teenager he remembered, stood on his porch. At 23, he was a man now, his face hardened by anger and resentment. "Hello, Dad." Connor spat, the word dripping with sarcasm. "Or should I call you John now?" Blake gripped the doorframe, steadying himself. "Connor," he managed, his voice hoarse from disuse. "How did you find me?" Connor shouldered past him into the cabin. "Does it matter? I'm here now. No thanks to you." Blake closed the door, turning to face his son. No, not his son, he reminded himself bitterly. The young man before him was a stranger, a painful reminder of the life he'd left behind. "What do you want, Connor?" Blake asked, struggling to keep his voice even. Connor paced the small living area, taking in the sparse furnishings and stacks of work documents. "What do I want?" He laughed humorlessly. "I want the last 5 years back. I want the father who didn't abandon his family without a word. I want," his voice cracked, and he paused, collecting himself. "I want you to look me in the eye and tell me why you left." Blake sank into a chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 50 years. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," Connor challenged, his eyes blazing. "Because from where I'm standing, you're nothing but a coward who ran away when things got tough." The accusation stung, but Blake held his tongue. He'd spent 5 years burying his emotions, and he wasn't about to let them resurface now. Connor continued, his words coming faster, angrier. "Do you have any idea what you did to us? Mom was devastated. She could barely function for months. And me? I had to grow up real fast, Dad. No college for me, couldn't afford it without you." And now he broke off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Now what?" Blake asked, dreading the answer. Connor met his gaze, and for a moment, Blake saw a flicker of the boy he once knew. "Mom's sick, terminal, and we're broke. The treatment she needs, we can't afford them." The news hit Blake like a physical blow. Lena dying? Despite everything, the thought of her suffering sent a pang through his heart. "I'm sorry to hear that," Blake said softly, "but I don't see what that has to do with me." Connor's face contorted with rage. "Are you kidding me? You owe us. You walked out, left us with nothing. The least you can do is pay for Mom's treatment and my tuition. It's your responsibility." Blake stood abruptly, anger flaring in his chest. "My responsibility? You want to talk about responsibility, Connor? How about the responsibility to be honest? To not build a family on lies?" Connor stepped back, confusion replacing anger. "What are you talking about?" With shaking hands, Blake retrieved a worn envelope from his desk drawer. He'd carried the DNA test results with him all these years, a constant reminder of why he'd left. Without a word, he thrust the papers at Connor. Connor's eyes widened as he scanned the document, his face paling. This can't be right. It's a mistake." "It's no mistake," Blake said, his voice cold. "Your mother lied to both of us for 18 years. If you want answers, if you want someone to blame for your problems, talk to her. Or better yet, find your real father. I'm sure he'd love to help." Connor staggered back as if he'd been struck. "No," he whispered. "No, you're lying. This is just an excuse, a way to justify abandoning us. Blake turned away, unable to bear the pain and confusion on Connor's face. I think you should leave now, he said quietly. This isn't over, Connor growled, crumpling the test results in his fist. You don't get to drop this bomb and walk away. Not again. As Connor stormed out, slamming the door behind him, Blake sank to the floor, his legs no longer able to support him. The confrontation he dreaded for 5 years had come and gone, leaving him feeling hollow and drained. Days passed, and Blake found himself unable to shake the encounter with Connor. The anger and betrayal he'd nursed for years had resurfaced, raw and painful. He threw himself into his work, taking on more projects than usual in an attempt to drown out the voices in his head. It was during one of these late-night work sessions that his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something compelled Blake to answer. Hello, he said cautiously. Blake, is that really you? The voice on the other end was familiar, tinged with disbelief and relief. Blake's breath caught in his throat. Alex? How did you get this number? Alex Turner, his old friend from college and fellow engineer, chuckled softly. It wasn't easy, let me tell you. But when Connor showed up in my office asking questions about you, I knew I had to track you down. Blake tensed at the mention of Connor's name. What did you tell him? Nothing, Alex assured him. But Blake, what the hell is going on? You disappear for 5 years, and suddenly your son is accusing you of abandoning your family? This isn't like you. Blake sighed, running a hand over his face. It's complicated, Alex. More than you know. Then uncomplicated for me, Alex pressed. Look, I've been running your old business as best I can, but your clients miss you. Hell, I miss you. Whatever happened, whatever you're running from, let me help. For a moment, Blake was tempted. The thought of confiding in someone, of sharing the burden he'd carried alone for so long, was almost overwhelming. But the fear of judgment, of having to relive the betrayal, held him back. I appreciate the offer, Alex, Blake said finally. But this is something I have to handle on my own. Alex was silent for a moment. All right, I get it. But Blake, you should know Connor's not giving up. He's determined to make you face up to your responsibilities, one way or another. After hanging up, Blake sat in the darkness of his cabin, Alex's words echoing in his mind. Connor wasn't going to let this go. And now that he knew the truth about his parentage, there was no telling what he might do. The next morning, Blake received another unexpected call. This time, it was from Becca Thompson, his former assistant. Blake, Becca's voice was hesitant. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I needed to talk to you. Becca, Blake said, surprise evident in his tone. It's good to hear from you. Is everything all right? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Not really, no. Blake, I've been trying to keep your business afloat since you left, but it's been a struggle. And now, with everything that's happening with Connor and Lena. Blake's grip tightened on the phone. What do you mean? What's happening? Becca sighed. Connor's filed a lawsuit against you, Blake. He's suing for financial support, claiming you're legally responsible for his college tuition and Lena's medical bills. The news hit Blake like a punch to the gut. A lawsuit? After everything that had happened, after the truth had come out, Connor was still pushing this? Blake, are you there? Becca's voice pulled him back to the present. Yeah, I'm here, he muttered. Becca, I don't know what to say. Say you'll fight this, Becca urged. Blake, I don't know why you left, but I know you. You're not the man Connor's making you out to be. Let me help you. We can gather evidence, build a case. Blake closed his eyes, weighing his options. He'd spent 5 years running from his past, but now it seemed his past was determined to catch up with him. Maybe it was time to stop running and face this head on. Okay, he said finally. Okay, Becca, tell me what I need to do. Over the next few weeks, Blake worked closely with Becca and a team of lawyers to build his defense. It meant dredging up painful memories, reliving the moment he discovered Lena's betrayal. But with each document gathered, each statement prepared, Blake felt a spark of the old determination that had once defined him. As the court date approached, Blake found himself back in Chicago, the city he'd once called home. The familiar skyline brought a flood of memories, both good and bad. He checked into a nondescript hotel, wanting to avoid any chance encounters with people from his past. The The night before the trial, Blake sat in his hotel room, staring out at the city lights. A knock at the door startled him from his reverie. When he opened it, he found Alex standing there, a bottle of whiskey in hand. "Thought you could use this," Alex said, holding up the bottle, and maybe a friendly face. Blake hesitated for a moment before stepping aside to let his old friend in. As they sat sharing a drink, the years seemed to melt away. For the first time in a long time, Blake felt the weight on his shoulders lighten, if only slightly. "You know," Alex said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass, "whatever happens tomorrow, you're not alone in this, Blake. You've got people in your corner." Blake nodded, grateful for the support, but unsure if he deserved it. As he prepared for bed that night, he steeled himself for the battle ahead. Tomorrow, he would face his past, confront the lies that had torn his life apart, and fight for the truth whatever the cost. The morning of the trial dawned cold and gray, matching the steel in Blake's eyes as he adjusted his tie. Years of isolation had hardened him, and he was ready for battle. A sharp knock announced the arrival of his lawyer, Sarah. "Ready to end this?" Sarah asked, her tone businesslike. Blake nodded curtly. "Let's bury them." The courthouse steps were a gauntlet of flashing cameras and shouted questions. Blake strode through, his face an impassive mask. Inside, his eyes immediately found Connor and Lena. Connor's jaw was set in defiance, while Lena looked frail and defeated. Blake felt no pity, only a cold determination to see justice done. As the proceedings began, Blake listened with detached interest to the legal maneuverings. It wasn't until Connor took the stand that he fully engaged, his gaze boring into the young man he'd once called son. "Mr. Harrison," Connor's lawyer began, "can you tell the court about your relationship with the defendant?" Connor's eyes flickered to Blake before answering. "He was my father. He raised me, taught me everything I know. And then, 5 years ago, he abandoned us without a word." "And what impact did this abandonment have on you and your mother?" Connor's voice shook slightly. "It destroyed us. Mom fell apart. I had to drop out of college to take care of her. And now, with her illness, we're drowning in medical bills, and the man who was supposed to be there for us is nowhere to be found." Blake listened, unmoved. When it was his turn to testify, he took the stand with confidence, his voice steady and cold. "Mr. Harrison," Sarah began, "can you explain to the court why you left your family 5 years ago?" Blake's gaze swept the courtroom before settling on Connor and Lena. "I left because I discovered that my entire life had been built on a lie. Connor isn't my biological son. My wife, Lena, had an affair and deceived me for 18 years. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Connor's face paled, while Lena seemed to shrink in her seat. "How did you make this discovery?" Sarah pressed. "I found an old photograph, became suspicious, and had a DNA test done. The results were conclusive. When confronted, Lena admitted to the affair. As evidence was presented and testimonies given, Blake remained stoic. During a recess, he found himself face to face with Lena in the hallway. "Blake," she began, her voice trembling, "I know I can never make up for what I did, but save it." Blake cut her off, his voice icy. "You had 18 years to tell the truth. You don't get to ask for forgiveness now." Lena's eyes filled with tears. "What about Connor? He's innocent in all this." Blake's expression didn't soften. "Connor made his choice when he decided to sue me. He's not a child anymore, Lena. He's responsible for his own actions." As Blake turned to walk away, he found Connor standing nearby, having overheard the exchange. "How can you be so cold?" Connor demanded. "After everything we've been through." "We?" Blake interrupted, his tone sharp. "There is no we, Connor. Your mother's lies made sure of that. You want to talk about cold? Try discovering that your entire family is a fraud." Connor's face flushed with anger. "I didn't know. How can you punish me for something I had no control over?" "I'm not punishing you," Blake replied evenly. "I'm simply not responsible for you. You're an adult now. Your problems are your own." As they re-entered the courtroom, Blake felt a grim satisfaction. He was done being manipulated by guilt and false obligations. The trial concluded with a ruling in Blake's favor. The judge, citing the evidence of Lena's deception and the fact that Blake was not Connor's biological father, dismissed the lawsuit. Blake stood, buttoning his jacket, ready to walk out of their lives for good. But the story wasn't over. As Blake prepared to leave Chicago, he received an unexpected visit from his old friend, Alex. "Blake, we need to talk," Alex said urgently. "It's about Rick Sawyer." Blake's eyes narrowed at the mention of Connor's biological father. "What about him?" Alex explained how he and Becca had uncovered evidence of financial manipulation. Rick had been siphoning money from Lena's accounts for years, using his position as her lawyer to cover his tracks. "He's been bleeding them dry," Alex concluded, all while keeping Lena quiet about the affair. A cold fury settled over Blake. This wasn't just about his personal betrayal anymore, it was about justice. With Becca's help, Blake meticulously gathered evidence, building an airtight case against Rick Sawyer. When they had everything they needed, Blake confronted Rick in his opulent office. "Blake," Rick said nervously, "this is unexpected. What can I do for you?" Blake tossed a file onto Rick's desk. "You can start by explaining this." As Rick flipped through the documents, his face drained of color. "These are confidential." "Cut the crap, Rick," Blake snapped. "We know everything. The affair, the embezzlement, all of it." Rick's facade crumbled. "You don't understand. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I just needed a little money at first, but then you got greedy," Blake finished for him. "And you let Lena and Connor suffer for it." Rick's eyes darted to the door. "What do you want from me?" Blake leaned in, his voice low and dangerous. "I want you to confess. To the affair, to the financial fraud, all of it. You're going to face up to what you've done." "And if I refuse?" Rick challenged weakly. Blake smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then I'll bury you myself. By the time I'm done, you won't have a penny or a shred of reputation left." Faced with the evidence and Blake's unwavering resolve, Rick broke. He confessed to everything, setting in motion a legal avalanche that would strip him of his law license and most of his assets. In the aftermath, Blake found himself once again face to face with Connor and Lena. They stood in the lobby of the courthouse, the weight of recent revelations heavy in the air. "I don't know what to say," Connor began. "All this time, there's nothing to say," Blake replied, his tone neutral. "Rick Sawyer will face justice for his crimes. The money he stole will be returned to you and your mother. It should be enough to cover medical expenses and your education." Lena stepped forward, hope in her eyes. "Blake, does this mean—" "It means I've done what's right," Blake interrupted. "Nothing more. The lies, the deception that doesn't go away." "But we're still family," Connor protested weakly. Blake shook his head. "No, we're not. Family is built on trust, and that's gone. I wish you both well, but our paths end here." With that, Blake turned and walked away, ignoring Lena's tears and Connor's stunned expression. He felt no joy, no sense of victory, just a grim satisfaction that justice had been served. Days later, Blake stood on the porch of his cabin in Wisconsin, looking out over the lake. Alex's truck pulled up, kicking up dust on the gravel driveway. "So, what now?" Alex asked, joining Blake on the porch. Blake took a deep breath of the crisp air. "Now, I start over. On my terms. No regrets?" Alex probed gently. Blake thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No regrets. Just lessons learned." As the sun set over the water, Blake felt the weight of the past 5 years finally begin to lift. He had faced his demons, confronted the lies that had shattered his world, and emerged stronger. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Blake Harrison was ready to move forward alone, unburdened and uncompromising.